Chapter 163, Jianghu Island. A spirit void battleship broke through the air and slowly landed towards the location of the Qin family spirit vessel. Followed. One after another figure flew down from the spirit void battleship. Qin family cultivator heard this movement, put down all the things in his hands and rushed out to watch the fun. These days have passed. Qin family cultivator already knew that his young patriarch had become the commander of the West Defense Area of Guang'an Mansion, and he was in charge of 100,000 cultivators and soldiers. Although the Qin family has prospered in recent years, the family has grown stronger. But suddenly becoming a big family in Guang'an Prefecture, the Qin family cultivator is undoubtedly a little hard to accept. Especially Qin Daochu and Qin Daolian. It seems that some time ago, they were still worried about the cultivation resources of the monks in the family after being promoted to the second-order spiritual vein. It's only been a few months. Qin Daoxian not only brought the Qin family to a new height, but also solved their urgent need for spiritual stones. Wow! Looking at the chests full of spiritual stones in front of him, Qin Daochu exclaimed. Qin Xinhe was also a little uneasy when he saw this scene. His nephew clearly only represented the Qin family in the Guang'an Prefecture Allied Forces, so why did he get a position as the commander of the Western Defense District and come back? Although Qin Daoxian had explained to him the powerful relationship a few days ago. But after seeing the treasure chest of spiritual stones piled up in front of me, I still couldn't help feeling a little bit. The Qin family has worked hard for so many years. The monks in the tribe produced flying swords day and night, only to save over 1 million spiritual stones. Now the Qin family is not doing anything, and looking at the spiritual stones in front of them, I am afraid that they will all exceed the inventory in the clan library. Thinking of this, Qin Xinhe couldn't help but ask, Daoxian, how many are there? Hearing this, Qin Daoxian made a gesture and said, a total of 175 million spirit stones. This is just a deposit, and 175 spirit stones will be delivered to my Qin family in the future. 1,750,000 spirit stones, it's just a prepaid deposit. Qin Xinhe only felt a little dizzy at the moment. This speed of making money is somewhat unacceptable to him. Qin Daoxian can't feel much change now, because there are nearly 80 million spirit stones waiting for him to deal with at the headquarters of the Western Defense District. Even after deducting more than 1,100,000 spiritual stones for cultivating third-order spiritual veins, there are more than 60 million spiritual stones left. Such a huge amount of wealth is enough for Qin Daoxian to slowly implement the plan that he had not dared to implement before. In addition to this spiritual stone, a large number of people migrated to Sequoia Island next. This is different from the female slaves he bought from the Izumo Kingdom in Guang'an Prefecture. These large numbers of mortals can provide the Qin family with a large number of women who marry Qin's men. And the women of the Qin family's own family can also marry into the affiliated family attached to the Qin family in the future. And so, decades later, these mortals will be slowly assimilated by the Qin family and become the help of the Qin family. Because compared to other clans, the Qin family will always encourage clansmen to have children. With enough women coupled with the Qin family's policy of encouraging childbirth, the Qin family will surely develop into a veritable family in Guang'an Prefecture. Unlike now, the big family that only relies on Qin Daoxuan's genius sword to cultivate his name and support it. Master Commander, I'll retire for the time being. After carrying the spirit stone, Lei Jin stepped forward and cupped his hands. Qin Daoxian waved his hand and said, brothers who have worked hard, this is a little meaning for brothers. Having said that, Qin Daoxian threw a storage bag over, which contained 5,000 whole spirit stones. Thank you for the reward, Lord Commander. Lei Jin took the storage bag and said with joy. Qin Daoxian nodded and watched the Lingshu battleship under his command leave. It's really convenient. If my Qin family can use this kind of spirit boat to transport goods in the future, that's the taste. Qin Xinhe looked at the Lingshu battleship with envy in his eyes. Qin Daoxian shook his head. The Lingshu battleship is not very suitable for transporting materials. The one that is really suitable for transporting materials should be the frontline transport ship of Qinyuan Jianzhong. Okay. Qin Xinhe glared, he'll just say you're still panting. The large transport ship that transports materials to the front lines of Wanxinghai and Izumo is a kind of strategic transport spirit boat refined by Qinyuan Jianzhong with great energy. It can not only carry dead things but also transport living things. It is said that the interior is a miniature cave, but I don't know what it is. Seeing Qin Xinhe like this, Qin Daoxian laughed. He still remembered that when he said that he would train a large number of refiners for the Qin family, Qin Xinhe also said that the Zhou family did not dare to think about it. Now it seems. In 2 years, the Qin family will further expand the Feijin factory. Even is not just a Feijin factory. Jianghu Island Industrial Zone. In a new factory building. Qin Daochu and Qin Daolian looked at the strange-looking magic weapon in Qin Daoxuan's hands, and they were a little confused. Young patriarch, what is this for? Qin Daochu pointed to the cylindrical magic weapon in Qin Daoxuan's hand and said curiously. This instrument, I call it a centrifugal wall breaker, also known as a centrifugal wall breaker. You will know its specific use later. Qin Daoxian smiled mysteriously. Finished? Qin Daoxian took out 3 kinds of elixir from the storage bag, namely Huanlinko, Weeping Blood Flower, and Huichi Root. These 3 kinds of elixir are all first-order low-grade elixir, and the total value is about 30 spirit stones. Qin Daolian recognized at a glance that these were the 3 types of elixir for refining the first-order low-grade elixir and the qi-returning elixir. Seeing the curiosity in Qin Daolian's eyes, Qin Daoxian smiled and said, "It's good." Finished. He put 3 elixir into 3 different cylindrical centrifugal wall breakers. Next second. He pressed a button on the centrifugal wall breaker. I saw the centrifugal wall breaker spinning at high speed. Qin Daolian and Qin Daochu were dumbfounded, not knowing what medicine Qin Daoxian sold in the gourd. But it used to be less than half a cup of tea. Qin Daolian's face suddenly became serious. How can it be? She looked at Qin Daoxian with a look of shock on her pretty face. Qin Daochu didn't know about alchemy, so he couldn't see why he came. At this moment, he said with an uncomfortable expression, "What's the matter?" This thing separates the impurities in the elixir from the essence of the elixir. Qin Daolian pointed tremblingly at the machine in front of him, even more shocked than when he first saw the Rongling furnace. What's the use of this? Qin Daochu still looked puzzled. Forget it, you're not an alchemist, so it doesn't make sense to tell you. Qin Daolian's face was full of contempt. Qin Daochu turned his head away in frustration. Qin Daoxian ignored the bickering between the two, and did the same, pressing all the buttons of the 3 centrifugal wall breakers. 3 kinds of elixir, under the action of 3 centrifugal wall breakers, all separate elixir impurities and elixir essence. Immediately afterwards, Qin Daoxian said, "I'll turn the valve open later, and the essence of the elixir will flow down. You have to combine these 3 kinds of elixir essences into a pill as soon as possible, you know?" Qin Daolian nodded. So long has passed. She has long been a qualified first-order middle-grade alchemist, and is also an alchemy teacher at Chongping No. 1 Primary School. Refining Qi Hui pill, the most basic first-order low-grade spiritual pill, is of course not difficult for Qin Daolian. Seeing her like this, Qin Daoxian opened the valve immediately. Next second. 3 kinds of elixir essences flow down directly under the action of gravity. Qin Daolian didn't dare to neglect, and when she used the technique of combining and refining into a pill, she caught the essence of the 3 kinds of elixir that flowed down, and then slowly combined it into a pill. It takes less than half a cup of tea. The essences of the 3 kinds of elixir were combined by Qin Daolian into a qi-returning pill, which floated in front of the 3 of them. That's it. Qin Daochu on the side of was surprised and said, "You used the alchemy furnace to help control the fire so as not to burn the elixir, why don't you use it now?" When Qin Daolian heard this, she immediately put on an expression that was too lazy to explain. Qin Daoxian did not have the idea of explaining the knowledge of alchemy to an alchemist who didn't understand anything. He turned to look at Qin Daolian and said, "How much do you think this kind of machine can help alchemists?" "This is simply an artifact of alchemy." Qin Daolian commented, "I used the alchemy furnace to make Huichi Dan before, and the success rate was about 60%. At the cost of refining a furnace of Huichi Dan 30 spirit stones, I can probably earn about 30 spirit stones. And now?" She shook her head and sighed, "Using this kind of machine to assist in refining the Qi Hui pill, it is absolutely impossible for me to fail, and at the most critical point, it saves me too much time refining the impurities of the elixir. I used to refine a furnace of Huichi Dan before, which took about 3 hours. Now, it only takes 1 stick of incense at most and I can make 10 Huichi Dan. On average it takes less than half a cup of tea. Half a cup of tea, that is, 1 every 5 minutes. Even if it is only refined for 10 hours a day, there are 120 Qi Hui pills. The price of each Huichi pill is 10 spirit stones, and the income can reach 1,200 spirit stones. This is just 1 day's income for a low-grade alchemist. Throwing out the cost, the gross profit is about 840 spirit stones, which is comparable to that of a refiner in the Feifei sword factory refining 5 flying swords a day, earning a profit of 100 spirit stones. Is simply not on the same level, This is just the most basic first-order low-grade spirit pill to restore qi. If you replace it with an elixir that assists your practice, the profit will be even greater. For example, a first-order mid-grade spirit pill, qi-gathering pill, costs 50 spirit stones for each. Even if the refining speed of this kind of elixir is a little slower, it can only refine 100 a day, and the income can reach 5,000 spiritual stones a day. Throwing out the cost, the gross profit in one day can reach a terrifying 4,000 spirit stones. And whether in Wuxia or in other cultivation worlds, the demand for medicinal pills is always the greatest, far greater than the demand for magical instruments, so there is no need to worry about market problems. A cultivator who buys a first-order magic weapon can use it for 10 years, but what about the elixir? If you eat it open, you should eat one a month and at least a dozen a year. This is just an elixir to assist cultivation. In times of war, elixir to restore true energy, elixir to restore injury, elixir to detoxify, etc., are all in demand. Is like the present Guang'an Prefecture. Auxiliary cultivation elixir and breakthrough elixir, which are always in demand, are excluded. There is a huge demand for the three kinds of medicinal pills, Huichi Dan, Jidu Dan, and Posha Dan, especially in the eastern sector on the front line. Qin Daoxian can now imagine that Zhou Mubai must be quite troubled by Posha pill and Jidu pill. Because of these two medicinal herbs, they are a must for dealing with zombies. Without them, the cultivator would have to raise the danger of zombies by more than 2 levels. Qin Daoxian felt the power of Posha Dan, and the effect was too good. Of course, he was taking the second-order high-grade Posha pill, which was naturally incomparable with the ordinary first-order Posha pill. But even so, when he and Zhou Mubai were able to kill each other from the corpse and blood evil formation of the other side, it was a great contribution to the breaking evil pill. If it wasn't for Posha pill that blocked most of the blood-shattering aura for them, he and Zhou Mubai would have been in a much more dangerous situation that day. Think of this. Qin Daoxian looked at Qin Dalian and said, "Now the children of Fuzi in the clan, how about the knowledge of alchemy?" Heard this. Qin Dalian hesitated slightly. "Young patriarch, they are only 6 years old." Ah. Qin Daoxian was embarrassed by the revelation, and immediately resolutely said, "Isn't this catching up with the turmoil in Guang'an? I can't help it." He glanced at the brand new factory building and said, "Dalian, after the results of this year's test come out, let's put the study places for the 50 best alchemy students in the Life of Blessings here. Can also be regarded as learning and production at the same time, without delay." When Qin Daochu heard this, he looked at Qin Daoxian with trembling eyes. "Is too cruel." When their batch of Taoist monks entered the factory at the age of 8, he already felt that Qin Daoxian was cruel enough. "Now I think that the family life is good, and the cultivation environment for the children of Fuzi will be better." As a result, the time to enter the factory is earlier, and it was changed to 6 years old. Qin Daoxuan's actions, even if the capitalists in the previous life saw it, I'm afraid they would be convinced. This has to be put in a previous life. Even if he was shot 10 times, it would not be enough for the common people to be angry. But Qin Daoxian had no choice. He really wants to develop slowly, but the general environment does not give him the opportunity to develop slowly. Now he can't wait to use the catalyst to make those immortal seedlings who have not grown up to grow up directly. The Qin family is too short of manpower. And industrial production can't do anything without people. At least before entering into intelligence, a large population is an indispensable factor for industrialization. As for letting outsiders enter the Qin family's factory, to be honest, Qin Daoxian is not at ease. In other words, he is not strong enough to resist this risk. If he is the true monarch Yuanying at this moment, then Qin Daoxian would dare to use loose cultivators or other family members to work for the Qin family factory. But now he absolutely dare not. Since it's going to be officially put into production here, why don't we give it a name? Qin Daochu suggested. Name? Qin Dalian lowered her head and thought. Let's call it Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory. Qin Daoxian thought about it and said, Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory. The two thought about it and then nodded in agreement. The name is quite satisfactory, and there is nothing to argue against. After naming his name, Qin Daoxian looked at Qin Daochu and said, Do you know why I came to you? Do not know. Qin Daochu shook his head, having a bad feeling in his heart. In this year, I plan to expand the Hongyin Feijin factory, as well as the Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory. For these two factories, one needs a melting furnace and the other needs a centrifugal wall breaker. These two special instruments all require you to refine them. What? Qin Daochu was dumbfounded when he heard this. Chapter 164. looking at Qin Daoqi's resentful eyes. Qin Daoxian smiled and said, "Don't look at me like that. I have to arrange a great formation for the family in Sequoia Island, especially Sequoia Island. Next, our family will build a fairy city there." Build a fairy city? Qin Daoqiu and Qin Dalian were attracted by his words. Is it a fairy city like the fairy city of Guang'an Prefecture? The eyes of the two lit up and said, "Of course it's not as good as the immortal city of Guang'an Mansion now, but in the future. It's hard to say." Qin Daoxian said a lot. The demarcation of the West Defense Zone means that the large area west of Guang'an House will be the Qin family's sphere of influence in the future. You must know that the family that thrives in this area is far more than the Qin family. Actually, even if the area to the west of Guang'an Prefecture is vast and sparsely populated, it really has a population of tens of millions. With such a population, there are at least hundreds of thousands of monks. It does not include people who will rush here from other regions in the future. The reason is simple. Don't look at the weakest strength of the West Defense Zone, but at the same time it is also the rear of Guang'an Prefecture, and the East Defense Zone, Northern Zone, and Lingbei Island are in the front line. For those loose cultivators who have no intention to go to the front line, or who dare not go to the front line, the Southern Defense Area and the Western Defense Area are their best choices. Especially the West Defense Zone. Because the Southern District is also the Zhou family in command. In the future, if Lingbei Island is corrupted by war, it must also support Lingbei Island and be involved in the war. Only the West Defense Zone seems to be the safest at present. Apart from preventing the corpse from sneaking around the bottom of the Wangxinghai Sea, there is almost no danger. This situation, as long as the mind is a little clearer, it is not difficult to analyze it. Heard that the family is going to build a fairy city on Sequoia Island. Qin Daoqiu and Qin Dalian were immediately excited. The body, which was a little tired, was full of motivation again. There is an unparalleled sense of achievement and pride in watching the family grow and grow in their hands. Including Qin Daoxian, I also feel this way now. True. With Qin Daoxuan's talent, he might abandon his family and become a loose cultivator on the front line of Izumo. He can go more smoothly and easily. But at the same time he can never reap that sense of pride and satisfaction. What is the practice of doing? Just for longevity? If it's just for the sake of longevity, like the Sun brothers, they become inhuman zombies, to some extent, isn't it also a kind of longevity? Obviously not. In Qin Daoxuan's view, the ultimate purpose of cultivation is to allow oneself to live freely. In the human world, it is too difficult to achieve the word happy and happy. Even more difficult than longevity and immortality. By the way, how is the infuriating temper of the two of you now? As if remembering something, Qin Daoxian asked suddenly. Hear this question. Qin Daoqi's face was full of confidence and he said, "My true qi will be polished in a year at most." So fast. Qin Daoxian raised his brows. The speed of polishing his true qi was not only not slower than him, but even 1 point faster. Of course. Grinding infuriating energy has nothing to do with spiritual roots, it's all about one's physique. Obviously with Qin Daoqi's physique, it is easier to perfect his infuriating energy. Qin Dalian saw Qin Daoqi's smug look on her face, and her pretty face was a little puffed up and said, "You young patriarch, my true qi has only been polished to 1/3. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian nodded. This speed is not too slow. You can build a foundation within 2 years at most. Hear the progress of their practice. Qin Daoxian couldn't help feeling emotional. Qin Daoqiu and Qin Dalian are the same age and they are less than 15 years old this year. Qin Daoqiu will build the foundation next year, and he will only be 16 years old, while Qin Dalian will be a little older, about 17 years old. In other words, both of them broke Zhou Mubai's record for foundation building. Of course, from Qin Daoxuan's point of view. Although the two of them broke Zhou Mubai's record of foundation building, their true talents were still far from Zhou Mubai's. The reason why Qin Daoqiu and Qin Dalian practiced faster than Tianling and Cultivator was entirely due to the unlimited investment of the Qin family's cultivation resources. This kind of investment is completely irrational in the eyes of the great cultivation forces. But the Qin family didn't care. Qin Dalian and Qin Daoqiu are one of the few cultivators in the Taoist generation. In the short term, Qin Daoxian also expects the two of them to share the heavy responsibilities for him. With their qi refining stage, they definitely couldn't share the heavy responsibilities for him, but after the foundation was established they could do more things. At least in the future, it will be more pompous to go out to communicate with other families on behalf of the Qin family. It doesn't matter that the Qin family really relies on Qin Daoxian to support the facade. This kind of big family can't help but make people laugh. encouraged Qin Daochu and Qin Daolian. Qin Daoxian left the Jianghu Island industrial zone. Start to set up the second-order Yunling formation on Jianghu Island. From the name of this formation, it can be seen that this is a second-order formation, and no one in the entire Qin family can arrange it except Qin Daoxian. Compared with the first-order Yunling Great Array, the second-order Yunling formation is much more complicated. Even with Qin Daoxian's formation skills, it took 10 days to complete the formation. Qin Daoxian, who has cultivated first-order spiritual veins, knows this in his heart. The next days, it is to look at the power of creation in the spiritual stone, slowly transform the spiritual veins, and promote the first-order spiritual veins of the Qin family to the second order. This time about half a year or so. Until then, the Qin family will have a second-order spiritual vein, which can not only be used by the clan to build foundations, but also provide enough spiritual energy for cultivation for the ever-increasing number of cultivators. After arranging the spiritual veins of Jianghu Island, Qin Daoxian did the same and began to arrange the spiritual veins of Sequoia Island. Delayed for so many days. Seeing that the commander has finally started to cultivate third-order spiritual veins for them, everyone was in high spirits. Sequoia Island is a deserted island, which means that it is difficult for everyone to cultivate for such a long time. Change to normal times. In this difficult environment, the cultivators have long since erupted. But the cultivators also knew that at this time, Guang'an Prefecture was in turmoil, and the front line was always facing the threat of the corpse tied on Lotus Island. It would be nice if they could have a safe place to stay. Otherwise, they can return to their respective clans, but after seeing the Zhao family end, who would dare to stay alone on their original island? Master Commander. See Qin Daoxian's escape. A senior 10,000 soldiers in the middle stage of foundation building stopped cutting trees with a flying sword and bowed to Qin Daoxian. Qin Daoxian glanced around the busy construction site and said, "Where's Mr. Qin?" "Qin will be in front." Following the direction of the 10,000 pawns' long fingers, Qin Daoxian saw that Qin Beiwang was hunched over, lying in front of a huge picture, describing something to Zhongxiu. Although the cultivators are not as proficient in architecture as Qin Beiwang, a man who has built houses all his life, since they usually open caves by themselves, they are not completely ignorant of architecture. Under the guidance of Qin Beiwang, the cultivators quickly understood what Qin Beiwang meant. Lei Jin cupped his hands and said, "Old Qin's meaning, I'll wait to understand. You can rest assured it's just that we have more people building houses. I am afraid that the number of monks who chop down trees and carry and cut stone is not enough." Obviously, Qin Beiwang didn't understand the construction speed of the monks, so he distributed all kinds of workers according to the proportion of ordinary people. Hearing Lei Jin's words at this moment, he couldn't help being stunned. Then according to the advice of the Immortal Master, how should the manpower be allocated? Qin Beiwang said respectfully. "I think 70% of people deal with building materials, and 30% of people build houses and pave roads. This ratio is more appropriate." "Okay, just follow what the Immortal Master said." Qin Beiwang nodded. "Old Qin." Just as he was talking, Qin Daoxian walked over from behind Qin Beiwang. "Master Commander. Master Commander." Seeing Qin Daoxian, everyone bowed their hands to him. Qin Daoxian responded one by one, then looked at Qin Beiwang and said in surprise, "Did you get the design of the city so quickly?" "Heard." Qin Beiwang stroked his beard proudly and said, "For so many years the old man has built bridges and roads for my Qin family, built houses, and expanded the county seat of Chongping County. It's not that the people under his command have made no progress at all." Hear this explanation. Qin Daoxian nodded clearly. Indeed, it is not only the cultivators of the Qin family who have made progress. The progress of mortals is actually greater than that of cultivators. It's just that Qin Daoxian's eyes have been on the monks, ignoring the progress of the ordinary people of the Qin family. Take a few steps forward. Qin Daoxian picked up the extremely complicated city plans on the table. After looking at them carefully, he raised his head and said, "Old Qin, don't you have room for the inner city?" "Inner city?" Qin Beiwang glanced at Qin Daoxian in confusion, not knowing what he meant by the inner city. But the expressions of all the foundation establishment cultivators present changed. How they do not understand the meaning of inner city. The so-called inner city is the immortal city built within the mortal city, such as Guang'an Prefecture Immortal City, Lingrui Immortal City and so on. Obviously, Qin Daoxian also wants to build a fairy city on Sequoia Island. It seems that the spiritual stones possessed by the West Defense Zone are indeed enough to build such a fairy city. Only, Master Commander, Leijun thought about it for a while and said cautiously, our military expenses, but part of it is the military salaries of the soldiers. I know. Qin Daoxian glanced at him and said with a smile, don't worry, I will distribute the military salaries of the soldiers in a lot of points. Whether it is on the front line of Izumo, or in the current Guang'an Prefecture coalition. When monks join the army they all have military pay. It's just that on the front line of Izumo military pay is paid in the form of military merit. In Guang'an Prefecture, the coalition forces were distributed in the form of spirit stones. Although this military salary is not high, there are a total of 100,000 soldiers in the Western Defense Zone, which is a terrifying figure. As for embezzling army salaries, Qin Daoxian couldn't do it. In his opinion, even if the military salaries are distributed to the soldiers of the scattered cultivators, they will still have to spend them sooner or later. The left and right are back in the hands of the Qin family. Why is it so ugly to give people a handle? Chapter 165. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, half a year has passed. Sequoia Island, Guanhai Pavilion. The waves crashed on the stone bench of the Guanhai Pavilion, making a roaring sound. The upper half is a human body, and the lower half is a figure with a fish tail. The enchanting upper body was exposed from the sea, looking at the harbor where the ships were constantly at the end of the line of sight, and sighed, I never imagined that in just 1 year the changes here would be so great. Heard. Qin Daoxian followed Luo Li's line of sight. In the distant harbor, the white sails are connected together, and most of the major families bring their own clansmen to Sequoia Island. Here as the resident of the Western Defense Zone. In the eyes of the monks of Guang'an Mansion, it is one of the safest places. Only half a year. With the concerted efforts of a group of monks, the prototype of a city has been slowly built on Sequoia Island. With the arrival of mortals, the city has gradually gained popularity and has become increasingly prosperous. Luo Li looked at the seaport city in the distance, turned her head and asked, what's its name? Guanhai City. Guanhai City. Luo Li murmured, then looked at the ugly pavilion in front of her, and couldn't help but burst out laughing. What's up? Qin Daoxian looked at her strangely. Nothing, just thought of something interesting. Luo Li shook her head, then I'm leaving. It seems that I can't trade with you here in the future. Now there are more and more people here. Saying that, Luo Li's eyes faintly revealed a hint of fear. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian smiled. Why can't you trade with me here? I'm not afraid. What are you afraid of? Seeing him like this, Luo Li said angrily, aren't I afraid of causing you trouble? Trouble? What trouble? Qin Daoxian said as usual, the so-called trouble is just an excuse for lack of strength. Since all the big clans have affiliated races in the Wangxinghai underwater world, isn't it only natural for my Qin family to have an affiliated race? But Luo Li didn't know how to argue. Seeing that Luo Li had misunderstood, Qin Daoxian smiled and said, who do you think built that city? He pointed to Guanhai City in the distance. Isn't it built by some big family in Guang'an Prefecture? Luo Liqio's face was full of surprise. Yes, it was built by the big family in front of you. Your Qin family? Luo Li looked at Qin Daoxian with an incredible look on her pretty face. The strength of the Qin family, although the Mer people are not clear, but they know that the Qin family is by no means a big family in Guang'an. In Guang'an Prefecture, there are only 3 families of Yang, Wu, and Zhao who can be called a big family. Among them the Qin family is not included. The Zhao family? Hearing Luo Li mentioning the Zhao family, Qin Daoxian shook his head. The Zhao family is gone. No. No. Luo Li was a little unresponsive. What does it mean when it's gone? Seeing her like this, Qin Daoxian told her what happened on Lotus Island. After hearing the news, Luo Liqio's face was full of horror. You mean? Gaju is not dead? Luo Li's voice trembled slightly. Right? Qin Daoxian frowned. Is the real person Xinjue so afraid of you? Hearing this, Luo Li took a deep breath, calmed down and said solemnly, you don't understand. According to the records in our clan, the true person of Xinjue did not only disrupt the nearby states, but also our underwater world. At that time, Sangzhou united the monks in Taizhou and Jingzhou to form a coalition army, but failed to strangle the real person of Xinjue. In the end, the Qinyuan sword sect sent 3 Yuanying Xinjuan to suppress the chaos of Xinjue. A late Jindan cultivator, is it so difficult to deal with? Qin Daoxian frowned. Very difficult. Luo Li nodded. The most difficult thing about Xinjue Jinren is not that he is far superior to the monks of the same level, but his ability to escape. Oh? What's his ability to escape? In the ancient books of the Zhou family, he also saw that Shinjue Jinren was extremely good at escaping, but the ancient books did not record his escape methods in detail. You should know that Shinjue Jinren has obtained the inheritance of an immortal from the upper realm, right? Qin Daoxian nodded. Almost everyone knew about this rumor. The reason why the loose cultivators are so interested in Shinjue Jinren is also because of his legendary experience. An ordinary loose cultivator, he was inherited by the immortals, and he has since then swept the world. To a certain extent, the experience of the real person Shinjue is simply a classic protagonist template in the novel. Of course, he still failed to defy the sky in the end, and was directly pressed to death by the 3 nascent soul true monarchs sent by the Qinyuan sword sect. However, the damage caused by the rebellion of God to Zhangzhou and the surrounding states was simply devastating. Luo Li didn't know what Qin Daoxian was thinking, so he continued, "In the legend, the immortal Shinjue obtained the inheritance of an immortal in a secret space opened up by an immortal. Dong Tian? Right?" Luo Li nodded. "The cave opened up by the immortals." She paused. "In this Dong Tian immortal mansion, immortal Shinjue has obtained several important inheritances and instruments, one of which is called Michin Fan, but in an instant he can escape hundreds of thousands of miles away." "Outside? 100,000 miles?" Qin Daoxian stared blankly at the other party, wondering if she was talking in her sleep. What is the concept of escaping 100,000 miles in an instant? Qin Daoxian is now flying with his sword with all his strength, and it will take nearly a day to reach it. Even if it is true monarch nascent soul, it would take nearly half an hour to cross a distance of 100,000 miles. In other words, even for true monarch nascent soul, it would be almost impossible to capture the true master Shinju holding the Michin banner. I just don't know how the 3 Yuanying Jinjuan of Qinyuan Jianzong trapped Shinjue Jinren. But think about it. It is nothing more than the use of formations or special instruments to block the space, so that Shinjue Jinren can't escape. More than that, Michin Fan, the real person of Shinjue, is said to be able to set the space node for transmission in advance. You mean, he placed the teleportation node in Xianfudangshan? Right? Lori nodded. It's too goofy. This time, Qin Daoxian finally knew why Qinyuan Jianzong sent a secret hand to solve the real Shinjue. To some extent. As long as the real person Shinju does not actively expose the cave opened by the immortals, there is probably no one in this world who can discover the spatial location of this cave. Qinyuan Jianzong knew that Shinjue Jinren was hiding in this cave, but there was no way to take him. Moreover, Shinjuezin's character is also extremely cautious. He only sent a group of corpse servants out to make wind and rain, but he did not come out behind the scenes. It seemed that the somersault 400 years ago had completely improved his memory, and he also knew the truth of the heavens. But this is not good news for Qinyuan Jianzong. True. With the strength of Shinjue Jinren, it is not a threat to Qinyuan Jianzong. But there is always such a character in your hinterland, and Qinyuan Jianzong must have a feeling of being stuck in his throat. Without even removing him, Qinyuan Jianzong would not be able to attack the country of Yunyan with all his strength. Because the real person Shinjue may set fire to the backyard of Qinyuan Jianzong at any time. I watched Luo Li leave. Qin Daoxian fell into deep thought. He is now finally certain that the war with the Lotus Island corpse servant is nothing at all. Whether it is God Ju Daoist or Qinyuan Jianzong, I am afraid that they will not care about the outcome of this war. For Qinyuan Jianzong, the most important thing is to find out the real person Shinjue. But, what is the most important thing to the real God? Also, you have been hiding for so long, why did you suddenly come out to engage in wind and rain? Could it be that you can't stand the loneliness? Too many puzzles lingered in Qin Daoxian's heart, making him feel heavy. Although for Qinyuan Jianzong, the battle with the corpse tied on Lotus Island was not important, but for the Guang'an monks, this war was a war to defend their homeland. Absolutely cannot fail. Otherwise, the Guang'an cultivator would have to hide in another state capital like a lost dog. But in Wangxinghai, there are no other spiritual veins that can allow monks from Guang'an to settle in. Even if the big clan has enough spiritual stones, they can cultivate new spiritual veins. But without the foundation of Guang'an Mansion, even the Zhou family would inevitably decline. Because monks practice, in addition to spiritual veins, they also need various cultivation resources. These cultivation resources must be purchased with spirit stones. Without Guang'an Mansion, a place to make money, where did the Zhou family get enough spirit stones to meet the needs of the Zhou family's tens of millions of clansmen and hundreds of thousands of cultivators to cultivate? The same is true for the Chen family on Jianghu Island. The Chen family finally got the recognition of Zhou Yang and other big clans in Guang'an House, and the family development is booming. Seeing that the family is getting stronger and stronger, why is Qin Daoxian willing to leave his hometown like this? Therefore, for the monks in Guang'an, especially the family monks in Guang'an, this battle is a must. With a heavy heart, Qin Daoxian flashed and flew towards Jianghu Island, Twin Lakes Island, Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory. Step into the factory. Looking at the young figures in the factory building, Qin Daoxian only felt a little sore in his nose. As long as there is a way, Qin Daoxian will definitely not let such a small cultivator of the Qin family come to the pharmaceutical factory to refine the medicinal pills. Fiyuan, how did you do it? It's been half a year. Why haven't you been able to refine the detoxification pill in a perfect way? You can only make one pill together at a time. You can make mistakes? 16-year-old Qin Daoyan saw that Qin Fiyuan failed to concoct pills. Her eyebrows stood upright and she reprimanded. He seemed to be frightened by Qin Daolian's reprimand. The little girl named Qin Fiyuan, her petite body trembled slightly, tears were faintly rolling in her eyes. Cough, cough. Qin Daoxian coughed lightly. Hearing this cough, Qin Daolian, who devoted himself to teaching everyone to make alchemy, came back to his senses, stood up quickly and bowed his head. Young patriarch. Qin Daoxian nodded and said with a smile, how is it, do you still get used to studying here? Qin Daolian knew what Qin Daoxian was most concerned about and smiled sweetly. Compared with the ethnic studies class, there are so many more practical opportunities. In just half a year, these 50 disciples of the blessing character can almost all refine the first-order lower grades. Medicine pill. At this rate, at most 1 year, they will be able to refine the first-order middle-grade medicine pill. Okay. Hearing the good news, Qin Daoxian nodded with satisfaction. The cultivator of the Qin family finally did not disappoint him. Chapter 166. It is different from the peaceful West Defense Zone behind Guang'an House. In the East Zone, the war with the corpse tide on Lotus Island has been intensified since the very beginning. The coalition forces in the Eastern Defense Zone led by Zhou Mubai were attacked by the corpse tide on Lotus Island before they could cultivate the spiritual veins and build the city gate. Fortunately, Zhou Mubai and the 3 Zifu cultivators from the Zhou family turned the tide and stabilized the almost collapsed battle situation. Finally, the 4 islands near Lotus Island have laid a foundation. In half a year, 4 immortal cities were established. Completely blocked the road from the entire Lotus Island to Guang'an Prefecture. Thus, if the corpse tide on Lotus Island wanted to spread to Guang'an Prefecture, they could only tear through the line of defense set up by Zhou Mubai. A full half a year. The 2 sides surrounded the 4 city gates and several battles broke out. Small battles are even more difficult to count. After half a year of fighting. In particular, Zhou Mubai took the opportunity to break out and wiped out tens of thousands of enemy zombies in one move, causing the Sun Brothers on Lotus Island to change their strategy. They chose to reduce the scale of wars, turning large wars into small, harassing raids. So far, the 2 sides have entered the stage of tug-of-war and war of attrition around the 4 city gates. Every day there are monks who fall in front of the city gate. Every moment, countless zombies were strangled by the coalition cultivators on the spot. However, compared to consumption, how can the monk be the opponent of the Lotus Island corpse servant? According to the statistics of the Allied forces in the Eastern Defense Zone, the corpse refining grounds on Lotus Island had at least tens of millions of zombies. Even if the strength of a single cultivator far exceeds that of ordinary zombies, it is still facing such a huge corpse tide. Especially under the invasion of Lianhua Island's evil spirit, it is almost impossible to counterattack Lianhua Island. You must know that the entire coalition army in the Eastern Defense Zone is only more than 900,000 soldiers. Among them, most of them are cultivators in the Qi refining period. Say it again. Zhou Mubai is also not sure how many Zifu-level zombies there are on Lotus Island. If it is as he guessed, the Purple Mansion zombies on Lotus Island can be refined in batches, then he rushed in, but he would not have the same luck as last time. The last time he and Qin Daoxian teamed up to get out of Lotus Island was based on the fact that the other party only had 5 zombies from the Purple House. Otherwise, 1 or 2 Zifu zombies last time will continue to be consumed. Once Zhou Mubai's mana is exhausted, both he and Qin Daoxian will be folded on Lotus Island. An island near Lotus Island. Above the city gate. A monk in spirit armor strode towards Zhou Mubai. At this time, Zhou Mubai was also wearing spirit armor, exuding a strong murderous aura. Master Commander. The Lingjia cultivator bowed to Zhou Mubai. The corpse tide at the 4th city gate has receded. Heard. Zhou Mubai nodded clearly and relaxed his clenched hands slightly. In this city gate he guarded, not many zombies dared to come to trouble at ordinary times. But the city gates of the other 3 islands are almost always faced with the invasion of the corpse tide from Lotus Island. No way who made the other Zifu cultivators in his Zhou family not have his deterrent power. If the zombies on Lotus Island are a group of mindless and sinister things, it would be better to say. But they have 2 conductors. Zhou Mubai felt extremely regretful every time he thought about it. It would have been nice if he had insisted on beheading the white-faced zombie that was fighting against him. Because he knows that now their coalition is facing such a big trouble, this guy is all behind the scenes. Even intercepted the Wu family's cargo ship from the beginning. It was a premeditated act to attract the attention of Guang'an Prefecture, and then take the opportunity to sneak up on the Zhao family and slaughter the entire Zhao family. As for taking the opportunity to remove the cultivator from the Zhou family's purple house who went to investigate, it was a matter of convenience. If it wasn't for him, Zhou Mubai and Qin Daoxian would go there. If the 3 Zifu monks from the Zhou family joined forces to investigate. The Zhou family is now about to lose 3 Zifu battle strength. Zhou Mubai had no doubts about this. The reason why Zhou Mubai felt that the group of Sun brothers removed the Zhao family was a premeditated act, because the coalition forces in the East Defense area were in urgent need of supplies, especially the 2 medicines Jidu pill and Posha pill. If the Zhao family is still there, they will definitely be able to provide medicinal herb resources for the coalition forces. But unfortunately the Zhao family is gone. Although the Zhou family is also a big alchemy family, but with the strength of the Zhou family alone, it is impossible to supply the medicinal pill consumption of the coalition forces in the East Defense Zone. And there is no detoxification pill and Posha pill. When facing zombies, the Qi refining cultivator of the coalition army will be more than 2 levels more dangerous. Many monks died not under the fangs of zombies, but in the follow-up corpse poison. This made Zhou Mubai extremely annoyed. But nothing can be done. Although his strength is strong, under the outbreak killing tens of thousands of zombies with 1 blow is basically his limit. And the other party has to give them a chance. Since the other party found out that Zhou Mubai was so fierce, there has been almost no large-scale invasion, all of which are small-scale and large-scale harassment. No matter how strong Zhou Mubai is, how can he take into account the 4 islands and so many battlefields? Tong? Master Commander, Wu Guangyi, who was wearing a spirit armor, hesitated a little. The medicinal pills shipped from Guang'an Mansion have run out again. It's only been a few days, how can it be used so quickly? Zhou Mubai looked at him and frowned. Seeing him like this, Wu Guangyi frowned and said with a wry smile, Master Commander, this month our 1st city gate, 2nd city gate, and 4th city gate have all broken out more than 10 small-scale harassment battles. These 3 city gates, each city gate consumes at least 10,000 pills per day, and the speed of refining pills in Guang'an Prefecture is simply not enough. They are consuming our army's logistics. Zhou Mubai took a deep breath and said solemnly. He knew that this must have been deliberately done by the corpses on Lotus Island. Once the logistics of the coalition forces in the Eastern Defense Zone are exhausted, the so-called monks will become vulnerable. There is no detoxification pill, and no recovery pill. During the Qi refining period, the continuous combat ability of the monks will drop by several grades. At that time, the balance of victory will naturally tilt towards the corpse group of Lotus Island. In terms of consumption, how could a Terran cultivator be compared to a group of zombies, and they were a group of organized zombies? The coalition forces in the Eastern Defense Zone had to burn the bodies of their comrades in time after each battle to avoid adding vitality to the enemy. But even so, there would still be cases where the corpses of the Qi refining soldiers were robbed. If the logistics are not guaranteed, this situation will become more and more. In the end, the more the enemy is fighting, the more and less you are fighting. How can you fight this battle? No. It can't go on like this. Zhou Mubai's eyes narrowed. At this rate, if these 4 city gates lasted less than 10 years, the monks would be exhausted. And the most terrifying thing is not this but the morale problem. Zombies have no fear and will only obey their master's orders. But monks are not. They will be afraid and they will choose to desert because of the heavy casualties. If the logistics cannot be guaranteed, Zhou Mubai estimates that deserters will begin to appear in the East Defense Zone within a year at most. Now everyone kills zombies and gains military exploits, plus less monks die, everyone is overjoyed. But when the logistics was exhausted and the casualty rate increased greatly, even the military exploits could not stop everyone's fear of war. You must ask for help from the rear. At least let the rear guarantee the logistical resources of the front line. Think of this. Zhou Mubai walked towards a great hall in the city gate. This hall is the headquarters of the Allied forces in the Eastern Defense Zone. The decoration in the main hall is very simple. The only thing that stands out is the communication formation in the main hall. Go to the front of the communication formation. Zhou Mubai sent a message to Zhou Mingho, who was far away in Guang'an Mansion, Limba Island, the residence of the Zhou family in Guang'an Prefecture. Zhou Mingho looked at the message sent by Zhou Mubai, sighed and said, "Let's hold a battle meeting and let fellow Taoist Yang definitely come to participate." After thinking about it, he said again, "Also inform Dao Yu Chen." "Yes, Patriarch." The Zhou family cultivator took the order and quickly retreated. The battle is tough. Zhou Mingho sighed. He knew that fighting against the corpses on Lotus Island was nothing at all, and the real danger had not yet been encountered by the Guang'an monks. His only hope now is that the backhand arranged by Qinyuan Jianzong is strong enough. It will allow them to get through this catastrophe. Sequoia Island, Guanhai City. The main hall of the Western Defense District headquarters. Qin Daoxin received a message from Zhou Mingho and fell into deep thought. Holding a battle meeting? It stands to reason that except for the corpse group in the East Defense Area and Lotus Island, there is not even a shadow of a zombie in the other defense areas. Even some small families began to clamor to return to the clan. For those who are not afraid of death, Qin Daoxin can only go with them. As for not regretting in the future, that is their own business. In the past 6 months, Qin Daoxin and Zhou Mubai have also used the communication method to contact several times. The last time I heard that he showed great power and wiped out tens of thousands of enemy zombies in one fell swoop. How could a battle meeting be held suddenly this time? Qin Daoxin had a vague guess in his heart, but he wasn't quite sure. If his guess is true, then it will really be the time for the Qin family to take off. Crisis, danger at the same time, also means the arrival of opportunity. For the current Qin family, this corpse tied on Lotus Island is a danger, but also an opportunity. Think of this. Qin Daoxin instructed Zhou Muqing and Lei Zhen to say a few words. Together with the light, they flew in the direction of Guang'an Mansion. The communication formation method can only be used for simple communication, and it is somewhat unrealistic to use the communication formation method to hold a battle meeting. Therefore, this battle meeting must be attended by Qin Daoxin in person. Fortunately, his current speed of escaping light is astonishing, comparable to that of a cultivator in the Purple House. It only took more than half a day to arrive at the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture. Without stopping all the way, Qin Daoxin's escape light flew directly towards the Zhou family's station. Wait until Qin Daoxin arrives. Found out that he was the last one to come. In fact, it is quite normal to think about it. Sequoia Island in the West Defense Zone is the farthest from Lingbei Island, and although his escaping speed can be compared to the Zifu cultivator, who is not a Zifu cultivator here, and his escaping speed is not slower than him. Sorry I'm late. Seeing Qin Daoxin, Zhou Mingho shook his head with a smile and said, "Since Qin Daoxin has arrived, let's start." Chapter 167, Limba Island. The main hall of the Allied Forces headquarters in Guang'an Prefecture. That's the situation now. After Zhou Mingho finished speaking, he looked at everyone. Seeing Zhou Mingho looking at him, Yang Linyuan frowned deeply and cupped his hands. "Fellow Taoist Zhou, my Yang family is not good at refining medicine pills, and the alchemists in the clan cannot even guarantee the supply of medicine pills for my own clan. The pills that ordinary clansmen cultivate has to rely on external purchases. This matter." Saying that, Yang Linyuan shook his head. The Yang family is good at shipbuilding, but they are really not good at alchemy and alchemy. Hear this. Zhou Mingho sighed. "Young Taoist Yang, let's see if we can suspend the supply of elixir to the clan, and give priority to the supply of elixir to the front line. Otherwise the East Defense Zone will be broken and Guang'an Prefecture will be ruined." After thinking about it, Yang Linyuan nodded with difficulty. He knew that this was not the time to worry about the cultivation of the clan. The most important thing at the moment is to resist the corpse tide from spreading to Guang'an Prefecture. It is best to force them to move towards Zhangzhou Xianqing and leave this headache to the Yi family. This is also the reason why Zhou Mubai deliberately left a gap for Lotus Island on the front line and did not encircle it. Thank you, fellow Taoist Yang, for understanding righteousness. Zhou Mingho stood up and bowed to Yang Linyuan. Young Taoist Zhou is serious. Yang Linyuan didn't dare to care, so he quickly stood up. Speaking of it, Zhou Mingho is not only a complete cultivation base of Zifu, but also much older than him. It's just that the friendship between Zhou and Yang's family is not that deep, and their seniority is completely calculated according to their cultivation. Wait until the two sit down again. Zhou Mingho still frowned. Although the Yang family promised to allocate the supply of the clan's medicinal pills to the front line, but as Yang Linyuan said, the Yang family was not good at alchemy. Also just a drop in the bucket. And his Zhou family had already transferred all the medicine supplies of the tribe to the front line. In this way, the frontline cultivators are still shouting that the medicinal pills are not enough. Actually, think about it. The 4 city gates on the front line consume an average of 30,000 to 40,000 pills per day. Although these pills are the lowest level first-order pills, they can't stand the huge number. This is still no large-scale war broke out on the front line. The two sides have been engaged in a tug-of-war and a war of attrition. Otherwise, the consumption of the medicinal pills would be more than tenfold in one day. With such a huge logistics of medicinal pills, which one can stand it, especially now that the Zhao family has been destroyed, the medicinal pill market in Guang'an Prefecture is going crazy, and the prices of all kinds of medicinal pills have skyrocketed. The Qi Gathering pill, which usually cost 50 spirit stones apiece, has actually risen to 80 spirit stones at this time, and the supply is still in short supply. As for the detoxification pills, breaking evil pills, and revitalizing Qi pills that are most in demand on the front line, they have risen to sky-high prices. Just when everyone was at a loss. Qin Daoxian coughed lightly. Seeing that everyone turned their attention to him, Qin Daoxian said, "Dare to ask Senior Zhou, the medicine pills needed by the Eastern Defense Area Allied forces are mainly low-level detoxification pills, right?" "Right?" Zhou Mingho's eyes lit up. "Could it be that your Qin family?" "Right?" Qin Daoxian nodded. "In the past few years my Qin family has cultivated a number of alchemists, but the pills they refine are of lower rank, and for the time being they can only refine first-rank low-grade detoxification pills and shattering pills." "And Huichi Dan. Enough. Enough. Hear this." Zhou Mingho seemed to hear the sounds of nature. The most in demand on the front line is not the high-level pills, but the low-level pills used by the cultivators in the Qi refining stage. There are more than 900,000 cultivators on the front line of the East Defense Zone, and how many tens of thousands of base-building cultivators? Most of them are cultivators in the Qi refining period. This is the same on the front line of Izumo. It's just that the soldiers on the front line of the Izumo kingdom are basically in the late stage of Qi refining. Few are like the Guang'an Prefecture Coalition Army. The army is filled with a large number of cultivators in the early and middle stages of Qi refining. Zhou Mingho looked at Qin Daoxian with a look of joy, and cupped his hands. "I wonder how many pills your Qin family can provide?" Yang Linyuan on the side didn't hold much expectations. In his eyes, the Qin family was recognized by the Zhou family and the Yang family, and it was more about Qin Daoxian, the Tianjiao sword cultivator. As for the Qin family itself, it is still too weak for the time being. How could such a weak family support the huge consumption of medicinal pills on the front line? But the next moment, Qin Daoxian's words almost made Yang Linyuan stare out his eyes. "My Qin family currently refines not many medicinal pills a day, only less than 10,000 of various first-order low-grade medicinal pills, but our Qin family has been stocking medicinal pills since a year ago. Now there is a lot of inventory, and it should be able to solve the urgent needs of the front line." Qin Daoxian arched his hands. "Hear this." Zhou Mingho was overjoyed while Yang Linyuan was stunned on the spot. Even the cultivator Zhang Zifu, who had been listening in, looked at Qin Daoxian in surprise. "Specific, how many?" Zhou Mingho looked at Qin Daoxian with expectant eyes. "I haven't counted the exact number, but it should be no less than 1 million, heard." Even with Zhou Mingho's palace, his heart couldn't help beating violently. 1 million pills. Even if it were 1 million low-level medicinal pills, it would take at least several hundred alchemists to refine the amount for a year without a break. With such a huge amount of medicinal pills, even the Zhou family would not be able to come up with it for a while. It's not that the Zhou family doesn't have hundreds of alchemists, but that all their medicinal pills have been supplied to the frontline defense area. As much as the Zhou family refines, they send as many medicines to the front. It stands to reason that the Zhou family, as such a huge family, should have a stockpile of medicinal herbs. However, this kind of medicine pill is not like a magic weapon. After refining, even if it is sealed in a jade bottle, it can only be stored for less than a few years, and the efficacy of the medicine will slowly lose. So in general, the medicinal pills used by the monks have just been refined so as to ensure the maximum efficacy. There is another reason. Generally speaking, it is a bit possible for the big clan to store Qi Hui Dan. But who would store so many detoxification pills and posha pills for nothing? If it weren't for the corpse chaos, the demand for these two medicinal pills has always been very low. It is far less demanding than the medicinal pills that assist cultivation. Seeing that everyone was so excited, Qin Daoxian couldn't help pouring cold water and said, "But my Qin family doesn't have enough elixir for alchemy now." Not finished. Yang Linyuan and Zhou Mingho looked at each other and smiled and said, "Fellow Daoist Qin, don't worry, we can supply the Qin family with as much elixir as you want. You just need to make every effort to refine the elixir." Extremely. Yang Linyuan nodded in agreement. Whether it is Lingrui City or Guang'an Prefecture Immortal City, a large number of spiritual veins have been built around thousands of miles. And the loose cultivators who survive on these spiritual veins have planted countless elixir over the years. Therefore, the most in short supply in Guang'an Mansion is probably the elixir. If the Zhao family hadn't been destroyed in this environment, there would have been more and more alchemists in Guang'an Prefecture. Think of this. Yang Linyuan didn't know what it was like in his heart. Originally, I just wanted to use the method of building spiritual veins to benefits from the Zhou family, but I didn't expect to hit it right, and now it provides sufficient raw materials for the medicinal pills consumed by the front line. Otherwise. Now not only is the problem of medicinal pills unsolved, but even the raw materials for refining medicinal pills are in a hurry. Hear this. Qin Daoxian was completely relieved. Since the Qin family can solve the problem of medicinal pills. Next, let's talk about the price of medicine pills. Now affected by the destruction of the Zhao family and the chaos of corpses, the entire Guang'an Prefecture's medicinal pill market has become somewhat abnormal. Especially the low-level elixir that is needed in large quantities by several front lines. It is very difficult to buy spirit stones. Fellow Daoist Qin, what is the price of your elixir? Zhou Mingho asked. Relationship is relationship, business is business. Without enough profit, the Qin family would not be able to keep refining the medicinal pills. Zhou Mingho and Yang Linyuan understood the simple truth. But, if one were to buy the elixir at the current market price of Guang'an Prefecture, even with the background of the Zhou and Yang families, they would feel overwhelmed. After all, they still don't know how long this war will last. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian thought for a while and said, "It stands to reason that my Qin family, as a member of the Guang'an house, should have a share of the military expenditures of my Qin family, but my Qin family is indeed very shy. Therefore, this time the supply of medicinal herbs should be based on the previous market price." Hear this. Zhou Mingho and Yang Linyuan breathed a sigh of relief. They really didn't see the wrong person. Qin Daoxian not only had amazing talent but also knew how to give up. Know when to make the right decision. True. If Qin Daoxian does this, he will lose a lot of profits. However, as long as the Guang'an Prefecture holds on to it, the Qin family will be able to gain even greater benefits in the future. Because the Zhao family is gone, the rise of the Qin family just makes up for the Zhao family's medicine pill market. This is the biggest achievement of the Qin family. But the premise of all this is that Guang'an Prefecture can keep it. Jidu Dan, Posha Dan, and Qihui Dan, the original market prices of the three kinds of spirit pills are all 10 spirit stones. Qin Daoxian paused. The elixir provided by my Qin family is also at this price, but I have a small request. Qin Daoyu said it bluntly. Zhou Mingho laughed. I want to settle part of this elixir with the merits of the Qinyuan sword sect, is that okay? This? Hearing this, everyone turned to look at the red-haired Zifu cultivator surnamed Jiang, who had been listening in and did not speak. See everyone looking at him. The red-haired cultivator opened his eyes and said, as long as the soldiers on the front line have no opinion, they can trade with military exploits at any time. Great. Qin Daoxian was excited for a while. Compared with spirit stones, what the Qin family lacked more at this time were all kinds of alchemy, artifact refinement, inheritance, exercises, sword tactics, etc. to enhance the family heritage. Don't say anything else. Speaking of foundation building exercises, Qin Daoxian has never switched to foundation building exercises since he broke through to the foundation building stage. On the one hand, it is because the real essence after the sword intent is more violent. Qin Daoxian needs to be carefully polished for 2 years. Another important reason. That is, Qin Daoxian did not have a suitable foundation building period. Although he had previously purchased a fire attribute foundation building exercise at the auction event, the power of that foundation building exercise was mediocre, which was not what he wanted. You must know that when a cultivator chooses a cultivation technique during the foundation building stage, he will have an opportunity to increase his true essence. Qin Daoxian certainly didn't want to make a choice so casually. And the exercises bought at the auction house are as powerful as the exercises exchanged in Qinyuan sword sect. Chapter 168. Jianghu Island Industrial Zone. Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory. In the brand new workshop, one after another cylindrical machines hummed, making a roar that was inconsistent with this era. The valve below the centrifugal wall breaker, strands of elixir essence keep falling, was skillfully caught by the cultivators of the Qin family's blessing generation, and then combined into a pill. Continuous practice for half a year. Countless times of blending into pills, the current cultivators of the blessing character, except for a few people, can easily blend a pill successfully with their eyes closed. After the medicinal pills were refined, they were skillfully put into jade bottles by female workers one by one, and then stored in boxes made of golden silk wood. So cooperate. Alchemists only need a simple action of synthesizing pills. As for putting the elixir into the centrifugal wall breaker, adjusting the speed of the machine, adjusting the speed at which the elixir essence flows, and filling the elixir into the bottle, they are all done by ordinary Qin clan members. Greatly improved the efficiency of alchemy. With the cooperation of the two sides for more than half a year. Whether it is an ordinary worker or a professional alchemist, the two sides have reached an excellent tacit understanding. Now, every alchemist can refine about 150 pills per day on average, which is nearly 1.5 times more efficient than the 100 pills per day at the beginning. Qin Daoyin looked at everyone's young figures and skilled operations. While feeling a little distressed, she couldn't help but feel proud of the Qin family. Such a long time. Not a single monk of the blessed generation complained of distress and tiredness. You know, they are only 7 years old this year. Hongyin Feijin Factory. The heat wave hit people, and the furnace operators and apprentices in the factory were all sweaty. Although the monk is strong, he did not sweat. But the long-term high-intensity refining of flying swords still makes everyone mentally exhausted. However, now everyone knows the catastrophe facing Guang'an Prefecture. Although they can't go to the front to kill the enemy, but producing magic weapons in the rear is no less effective than the soldiers on the front. Therefore, even the monks of the blessing generation, under the training of the monks of the Taoist generation, began to refine the first-order low-grade red shadow flying sword one by one. As for the earliest batch of Taoist monks, they have already begun to refine the first-order high-grade flying swords. Compared to Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory, Hongyin Feijin Factory has a much wider range of instruments and grades. Chongping No. 1 Xiaoxin Primary School. Qin Xianhe is explaining the matters needing attention in practicing Guiyuan Gong for the newly enrolled monks of the Fuzi generation. Seemed to hear the bird song outside the window. Qin Xianhe couldn't help looking out the window, and his thoughts gradually drifted further and further away. Old Patriarch. A Xin Miao of the Fu character generation seemed to notice that Qin Xianhe was distracted, and could not help calling out softly. "I'm fine." Qin Xianhe smiled. "Let's continue. Where did we just talk about?" "Yes, the technique of refining aura." Overlooked from above. The entire Jianghu Island presents a thriving scene. But compared to the sparsely populated Jianghu Island, Guanhai City on Sequoia Island is called the real prosperity. Thanks to the concerted efforts of the monks, Guanhai City has been almost completely completed. Leftover means that with the further expansion of the population, the urban circle continues to expand outward. The city structure of Wanxinghai is the same. The inner city of Guanhai City is the location of Xianqing. However, now this fairy city can only be regarded as a large market at most. But as monks continue to gather towards Sequoia Island, this square city will definitely gradually evolve into a fairy city in the future. No one would doubt this. Xianqing always has the characteristics of attracting monks. Because the immortal cities are built on the spiritual veins, and the scattered cultivators lack spiritual energy cultivation. This is also the reason why the Yang family built the spiritual veins for the scattered cultivators, and the scattered cultivators are so excited. Limba Island. The Great Hall of the Allied Forces headquarters in Guang'an Prefecture. I asked, the soldiers in the East Defense Zone are willing to exchange their military exploits for medicinal pills. After communicating with the East Defense Zone again, Zhou Mingho said. Qin Daoxian looked at Zhou Mingho and asked, "If I don't know how to settle it by military merit, how to settle it?" This point let Dao Yuzhang speak, heard the words. The red-haired cultivator surnamed Zhang nodded and said, "According to the regulations of the Qinyuan sword sect, there are 2 types of merits in frontline battles, small merits and great merits. 100 minor merits can be exchanged for 1 major merit. In the frontline battlefield, a small effort can be exchanged for a spiritual stone. It's just that spirit stones cannot be exchanged for small merits." Qin Daoxian nodded clearly and exchanged unilaterally. After pondering for a moment, Qin Daoxin said, "So, 10 small works can buy 1 medicinal pill?" Heard the words. The red-haired monk surnamed Zhang gave Qin Daoxin a deep look and smiled. Although Qinyuan Jianzong can't exchange spirit stones for military merits, privately among soldiers the exchange ratio of small merits and spirit stones is 10. Small work in exchange for 12 spirit stones. Zhou Mingho on the side of waved his hand and said, "Just follow the price that Dao Yuqin said." Then looked at Qin Daoxin and said, "How many military exploits do you plan to exchange?" "I plan to exchange 50% of the spiritual pills supplied by the Qin family for military merits." 50%. Zhou Mingho nodded. "Okay, no problem. On behalf of the Guang'an Prefecture Allied Forces, I agree to your Qin family's request." "Thank you, Senior Zhou." Qin Daoxin arched his hand. "No, it should be me thanking you." Zhou Mingho said solemnly, "If you win this battle, your Qin family's contribution is great. Don't dare, don't dare." Qin Daoxin waved his hands again and again. But he also knew that the Qin family did a lot of credit for supporting the shaky logistics of the Guang'an Allied forces at this time. Next, the Zhou family directly dispatched 2 Lingshu battleships, together with Qin Daoxin, to return to Jianghu Island to get the spiritual elixir. 1 day later, Qin Daoxin returned with the 2 spirit void battleships. Far away, he saw Zhou Mingho waiting eagerly in front of the headquarters hall. Seeing that boxes of elixir were removed from the spirit void battleship, Zhou Mingho couldn't wait to step forward, opened the wooden box and looked at the bottled elixir in the wooden box. Zhou Mingho's face was full of joy. Good, good, good. Zhou Mingho took out a bottle of elixir at random, opened the seal, and a scent of medicine wafted through his nostrils. "Is the detoxification pill that is in short supply on the front line?" Seeing Zhou Mingho check the medicinal pills in person, Qin Daoxin introduced, "This time my Qin family brought a total of 540,000 detoxification pills, 300,000 broken evil pills, and 230,000 Qihui pills, a total of 1.07 million spirit pills." Then, Zhou Mingho's consciousness was swept away, and he knew that what Qin Daoxin said was not bad. Nodded immediately and said, "According to the price we agreed, 50% of the pills will be paid for with spiritual stones, and the other 50% will be paid for military merits. The coalition forces in the eastern defense area will need to pay your Qin family 5.35 million spiritual stones and 53,500 great merits. I have prepared the spirit stone for you, you can withdraw it at any time. As for the military exploits." He looked at the red-haired purple manor monk beside him. The red-haired monk nodded and said, "Since the soldiers on the front line are willing to pay for their military exploits, I can transfer the military exploits of the coalition forces in the eastern defense zone to your Qin family." Finished. I saw him take out a disc-shaped instrument and tap it lightly. Immediately, a screen of light projected in front of everyone. This is the Arc Shadow Disc, a special instrument specially made by Qinyuan Jianzong to record military exploits. To briefly introduce, the red-haired monk kept sliding his fingertips on the light curtain projection. When Qin Daoxin saw this scene, he suddenly felt like watching a holographic projection in a high-tech movie. The red-haired cultivator didn't know what Qin Daoxin was thinking, and after some manipulations he nodded and said, "Okay, the 53,500 meritorious deeds have all been allocated to your name. You can use these military exploits to exchange for various resources given by Qinyuan Sword Sect." Finished. He handed Qin Daoxin a jade slip. "Here records the types and prices of resources that can be exchanged in Qinyuan Jianzong. You can take it back and learn more about it," said, with an inexplicable smile on his face. "It's the first time I've seen that people who haven't been on the front line can get so many military exploits." Hearing this, Qin Daoxin's expression froze slightly. Seems to think that Qin Daoxin has misunderstood. The red-haired cultivator waved his hand and said, "Fellow Daoist Qin, don't misunderstand, I just think that your Qin family cultivator's luck is really good. By the good words of my predecessors, my Qin family cultivator has always had good luck." Hearing this, the red-haired monk stopped talking. Actually, Qin Daoxin also knew that. This red-haired cultivator from the Purple Mansion, as a cultivator from the front line, must have gone through countless battles to get to where he is today. Unfortunately, his fighting for so many years is actually not as good as Qin Daoxin's business this time. Such a huge disparity, how could it not make him feel uneasy? In a flash, he also understood that these military exploits were not owned by Qin Daoxin alone, but were earned by the hundreds of alchemists of the Qin family who worked hard for a year, so he had nothing to be jealous of. went back to the Lingfu where the Zhou family had prepared for him. Chen Daoxian impatiently took out the jade slip in the storage bag and looked over it carefully. The resources given by Qinyuan Jianzong are almost everything. But in general they are roughly divided into two categories. The first one is knowledge. The second is the material category. The so-called knowledge category includes exercises, spells, alchemy inheritance, utensil refining inheritance, talisman inheritance, formation inheritance, puppet art. The material category is all kinds of treasures, such as unprocessed spiritual minerals, spiritual medicines, spiritual plants, and even all kinds of rare spiritual things. There are also processed treasures such as instruments, elixir, charms, array plates and so on. Look through it roughly. In general, it is the most cost-effective to exchange for knowledge-based resources with military exploits, but it is not as cost-effective to exchange for material-based resources as to buy them with spirit stones. The various resources in the jade slips simply dazzled Chen Daoxian, and he didn't know how to choose. Fortunately, he had a clear goal this time. First of all, it must be exchanged for cultivation techniques for the family monks. At present, the Chen family has only one foundation building exercise, Qi Yang Gong, which was purchased from the auction house last time. This exercise is not bad, but it is indeed too common, and the range of choices is too narrow. In the future, the cultivators of the Chen family will not all practice one type of exercise. If there is a monk with a water attribute spirit body in the Chen family in the future, wouldn't there be no exercises to practice? Therefore, for the 5 elements, the Chen family must have at least one foundation building period and even the Zifu period. And it is best to use the kind of exercise with a very high ceiling. For example, Qinyuan Jianzong's Jinzong Gongfa Qinyuan Sword Classic is such a very high-capacity method. Chen Daoxian searched carefully and found that the Qinyuan Sword Classic was listed impressively. I heard before that Qinyuan Jianzong's general sect's Jinzong exercises were exchanged for the monks on the front line. Now I look at it and it is true. Chen Daoxian took a closer look and found some differences. Chapter 169. Qinyuan Sword Sutra is indeed available for frontline monks to exchange, but it is only limited to the content of the Foundation Establishment period and the Purple Palace period. Follow-up exercises can also be exchanged with Qinyuan Jianzong, but then the monks must go to Qinyuan Jianzong to exchange them in person. This is to prevent the enemies of Izumo from breaking into Wangxinghai and defrauding Qinyuan Jianzong's Jinzong exercise. Sure enough, there are restrictions. Chen Daoxian nodded. That's right, if there are no restrictions at all, Chen Daoxian will be surprised. You must know that this Qianyuan Sword Classic is said to be passed down by Qianyuanzi, the founder of the Qianyuan Sword sect. And Qianyuanzi is the true immortal of Mahayana, the kind of powerful cultivator who finally ascended to the upper realm. The exercises he left behind were actually spread so widely by the younger generations. This moment, Chen Daoxian couldn't help but be very curious about the suzerain of Qianyuan Sword sect. What kind of person could have such great courage and courage? Actually spread the Zongzong method to the world without hesitation. At least, let Chen Daoxian now spread the knowledge of Chen family's unique industrial alchemy and tool refining. He is not very willing, although he knew that doing so would quickly increase the strength of the entire Wangxinghai. But whether Chen Daoxian is short-sighted or only considers his own family, he cannot be so selfless and spread the knowledge of industrialization to the world. At least in the eyes of Chen Daoxian now, the only people who can be truly recognized by him are the 13th uncle and the Qin family cultivators whose blood is thicker than water. The foundation building period Qinyuan Sword Sutra requires 10,000 great deeds, and the Zifu period Qinyuan Sword Sutra. Sigh. Chen Daoxian took a deep breath. 100,000 great merits is equivalent to 10,000 spiritual stones. Just such a practice that is only limited to oneself, it is actually equivalent to a third-order spiritual vein. He thought he had 53,500 great merits and was already very rich, but after seeing the exchange price of the Qinyuan Sword Classic, he felt that he was still very poor. He now vaguely understands why the sect master of Qinyuan Sword sect would take out this top-level exercise and exchange it. I would like to ask the monks who practiced the Qinyuan Sword Sutra in the foundation building period, are they willing to switch to other exercises with mediocre power after entering the Zifu in the future? Certainly not reconciled. Since he is not reconciled, he has to work hard to earn military exploits and swear to the death for Qinyuan Jianzong. It can be said that Qinyuan Jianzong only used this technique to capture the hearts of thousands of swordsmen in Wangxinghai. And what is the combat power of the sword cultivator? Qin Daoxian himself has experience as a sword cultivator. He has no doubt now that Zhou Mubai must be practicing this technique. As a sword cultivator, as a cultivator who claims to be the same level of combat power ceiling, no one wants to be weaker than other cultivators. Even Zhou Mubai failed to comprehend the sword intent during the qi refining period, and he was always upset. Because compared to Qin Daoxian, he lost an opportunity to temper his infuriating energy, and he was always 1 point weaker than Qin Daoxian of the same rank. 4 Swordsman. This weak point is often the gap between heaven and earth. Changed? He glanced at the Qinyuan Sword Sutra of the foundation building period and decided to exchange it. Continue reading. Qin Daoxian no longer rummaged in the knowledge category, but in the elixir category. Found it. Qin Daoxian's face was full of surprise. Millennium Vermilion Fruit. Looking at the red jade-like spiritual fruit in the jade slip, Qin Daoxian's face was full of excitement. This is exactly the 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit he saw at the Guang'an House auction event. It is said that it has the effect of prolonging life for 30 years. This time, Qin Daoxian no longer had to be discouraged by Uncle 13, and decided to exchange it decisively. The exchange price of Millennium Zhugua is 15,000 great merits, which is half more expensive than the Qinyuan Sword Sutra in the foundation period. But Qin Daoxian thinks it's worth it. Without Uncle 13's silent persistence, the Qin family may have vanished long ago, and there is no place for today's rise. All the cultivators of the Qin family should appreciate the credit of Qin Xianhe. This treasure of longevity, Qin Xianhe, deserves it. Decided to exchange the Qinyuan Sword Sutra and the Millennium Vermilion Fruit in the foundation building period. Qin Daoxian only has 28,500 meritorious deeds left. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency in his heart. Look for other 5-element exercises. Qin Daoxian took a deep breath and continued to find a method for the future foundation-building monks of the Qin family. 5 elements cultivation techniques with the highest upper limit up to the nascent soul stage were selected by Qin Daoxian. Of course, he is worth exchanging for this part of the foundation establishment stage, a complete exercise that goes directly to the nascent soul stage, which is not something Qin Daoxian can exchange. There is actually a difference between personal exchange and family exchange in exchange for this exercise. Qin Daoxian had a headache. The Qinyuan Sword Classic he chose was a personal exchange. That is to say, when he redeems this practice, he must make an oath of the Great Way, and he can only practice it himself and cannot pass it on to others. And the family exchange is that this exercise can be practiced by all the cultivators of the Qin family. The exchange price of this exercise is 10 times more expensive than the personal exchange. In fact, after careful calculation, family exchange is definitely more cost-effective than personal exchange. Because it is impossible for a normal family to have only 10 monks. The inheritance of the refining equipment that the monks of the Qin family Xinzi generation exchanged for Qinyuan Jianzong was the family exchange. Qin Daoxian turned back to the introduction of Qinyuan Sword Classic again, and found that there was no family exchange, only personal exchange. See this? His face was full of anger. I thought I could pick up a big bargain, but I didn't expect that Qinyuan Jianzong had already considered everything. Think carefully. Since this war merit system has been implemented for 400 years, even if there were loopholes, it must have been blocked by Qinyuan Jianzong long ago. Forget it, anyway. Besides me, my Qin family doesn't have a second sword cultivator. It would be a waste to exchange 10 times the price for this Qinyuan Sword Classic. Qin Daoxian comforted himself. Individuals can exchange the 5 elements of the foundation building period with 2,500 great merits, but for family exchanges the price is 10 times higher and requires 25,000 great merits now. Qin Daoxian only has 3,500 great merits left. High-level exercises that can be practiced to the nascent soul stage are too expensive. Qin Daoxian's face was full of distress. This is only a part of the foundation building period. If the complete exercise is exchanged, wouldn't it be ruined? Now he finally knows what Qinyuan Jianzong relies on to pay for the military expenses of countless monks on the front line. Is to rely on these intangible knowledge such as exercises, spells, swordsmanship, inheritance and so on. And these are what the loose cultivators and even the family cultivators lack the most. As for family cultivators or loose cultivators who get these exercises, their strength will grow and they will be able to compete with Qinyuan Sword Sect. Is totally overthinking it. Qinyuan Sword Sect in the process of attacking Chuyin Kingdom, most of the plundered resources were digested and absorbed by it. In addition, Qinyuan Jianzong's basic plan in the underwater world of Wangxinghai, and its various inheritances are more complete and complex than any force in Wangxinghai. In addition, it has an uncountable mortal population in its vast territory, and its legacy as a Mahayana true immortal lineage. I feel that I have acquired a few exercises and I want to resist the Qianyuan sword sect. The end is definitely 100 times worse than the real Shinjua. Shinjua Jinren still got the complete inheritance of immortals, and there is also a fairy mansion cave where he can escape. The major families of Wanxinghai, including the Yuanying family, which one has this condition. There is still 3,500 great merits. What can I exchange for it? Qin Daoxian rummaged through the jade slip again. Can be said that he wants everything in it. Whether it is various inheritances or substantial treasures, it can quickly increase the strength of the Qin family. But helpless. Too few military exploits. Oh, I'll choose you. After searching for a long time, Qin Daoxian reluctantly withdraws his consciousness from the jade slip. What he finally chose was not inheritance, not treasure, but a formation, to be precise, a fourth-order mountain protection formation. Logically speaking, arranging a fourth-order array is beyond Qin Daoxian's ability. However, he has the Hongming Enlightenment Classic hanging on it, and he has a deep knowledge of the formation method. I believe that with careful study he will be able to arrange this formation method sooner or later. He glanced at the various formation materials of this fourth-order mountain protection formation. Is not a rare thing, it is something that can be purchased in Guang'an Prefecture. Since it's something that Guang'an Prefecture can buy, isn't it just a matter of spending some spirit stones? This spiritual stone, not to mention that the Qin family is not short of it now. There are still nearly 70 million spiritual stones lying in the main hall of the Western Defense District headquarters alone. To know. Arranging the mountain protection formation is not only a matter of the Qin family. Seaview City on Sequoia Island also needs to arrange this formation. The Qin family bought the knowledge of the great formation of protecting the mountain, and the spirit stones in the West Defense area were used to buy the materials for the formation. It was very fair and no one could say a word. Seeing that he only had 500 great merits left, Qin Daoxian put the jade slip into the storage bag in distress. Now that it has been decided, I will go to the red-haired monk surnamed Jianghu to exchange it tomorrow. 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit may need to be specially transported. But all kinds of knowledge inheritance he should be able to get it on the spot. These things he has already asked Zhou Mingho to learn more about them. The next day, Qin Daoxian registered the various resources he wanted to exchange one by one. The red-haired monk followed Qin Daoxian's words and his cheeks kept twitching. Are you sure you want to exchange the Qianyuan Sword Classic for this exercise? Sure. Qin Daoxian nodded. Make an oath. Immediately. Qin Daoxian made an oath to promise not to spread the Qianyuan Sword Classic. Next moment, the red-haired friar took out the arc shadow disc and moved it on it again. So, a slender beam of light shot out from the arc shadow disc and went straight to the center of Qin Daoxian's eyebrows. Qin Daoxian knew that this was the normal procedure for exchanging exercises. He then closed his eyes. In the next second, a mysterious and unusual exercise appeared in his sea of consciousness. Before taking a closer look, Qin Daoxian opened his eyes and looked curiously at the arc shadow plate in the other's hand, saying, "This magic weapon is really amazing. Of course, this is an important guarantee for the perfect implementation of my Qianyuan Jinzong war merit system. Otherwise, it would be so easy for countless cultivators on the front line to exchange merit methods." Heard this? Qin Daoxian nodded in agreement. He is also an artifact refiner, and he can clearly know how amazing the talent that the person who refines this artifact possesses. Qin Daoxian created new instruments, relying on the Hongming Enlightenment Classic, to store his understanding. And this item refiner relies entirely on his own amazing talent. A glimpse of the leopard in the pipe can be seen. What a crouching tiger, hidden dragon in Qianyuan Jianzong. Chapter 170. The knowledge of the 6 exercises and formations was transmitted to Qin Daoxian's sea of knowledge. Even with his spiritual strength comparable to that of a cultivator in the Purple House. Also felt a little exhausted. The red-haired monk surnamed Zhang glanced at Qin Daoxian and said, "The 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit you want will take some time to be delivered." Hearing this, Qin Daoxian frowned. "After a while?" "Right?" the red-haired cultivator inquired and said, "You are lucky. Zhangzhou Xianxing happens to have a frontline transport ship at the moment, and it can come over in about 3 days. However, the shipping fee is yours to pay." Shipping fee. Qin Daoxian looked surprised. Of course there is a transportation fee, otherwise a frontline transport ship will make a trip just for you. How much face do you have to have? Hearing this, Qin Daoxian said helplessly, didn't you say that the frontline transport ship is in Sangzhou Xianqing? Can't I get it myself? Hearing the words, the red-haired cultivator's face was full of deep meaning. Transporting various resources for the frontline soldiers can also be regarded as a fortune for an adult in Qinyuan Jianzhong. Are you sure you want to do this? This? Qin Daoxian bowed his hands. Junior doesn't know about it, I hope Senior will forgive me. Involves the interests of the top officials of Qinyuan Jianzhong, so he will naturally not break this rule and only make others unhappy. It's just about spending some spirit stones or military exploits, there's no need to offend people. Seeing Qin Daoxian being so knowledgeable, the red-haired cultivator couldn't help but think highly of him. In Wangxinghai, there are many talented cultivators who are frivolous and ignorant when they are young, but unknowingly offend many people they cannot afford to offend. These monks often end up miserably. Obviously, the sword cultivator named Qin Daoxian in front of him knows how to advance and retreat and how to choose. At this moment he finally understood why the Zhou family and the Yang family were so optimistic about the young monk in front of him. Is definitely not just because of his kendo talent but also other qualities in him. If a person has only talent but he makes enemies everywhere, this kind of person is destined to not go far. Only people like Qin Daoxian who are talented and have a good government can go a long way on the complicated path of cultivation. To transport a 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit from Sangzhou Xianqing to this point, you need to pay 100 great merits or 10,000 spirit stones. You can choose any payment method. I choose to use spirit stones. The red-haired monk surnamed Zhang nodded. Qin Daoxian's choice was not surprising to him. On the frontline battlefield of Izumo, most monks who need to exchange special resources use spiritual stones to pay for transportation. After all, meritorious deeds can buy many resources that cannot be purchased by spirit stones. In the eyes of monks, it is much more precious than spirit stones. Otherwise it will not be possible to exchange 12 spirit stones among soldiers for 10 small work. Waited less than 3 days. A ray of light galloped toward the Zhou family's residence in Xianqing, Guang'an Prefecture. Qin Daoxian stood in front of the main hall. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he found that the person in front of him was also a cultivator of the Purple Mansion, but his cultivation was too low so he could not tell which level of cultivation he was in the Purple Mansion. But he could feel that the other party was by no means an early cultivator of the Purple Mansion. The person who came was wearing a blue Taoist robe with a jade crown on his head holding up Taoism, his face was thin and he looked in good spirits. Seeing the monk surnamed Zhang Zifu, the visitor immediately bowed his hands and said, Brother Zhang. The red-haired monk surnamed Zhang nodded. Have you brought something? Bring it, that's it, said the visitor. Took out a jade box from the storage bag and the entire jade box was banned and sealed. See you. The red-haired cultivator surnamed Zhang took the jade box from the young Zifu cultivator and handed it to Qin Daoxian. The 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit you want, check it out. Okay. Qin Daoxian couldn't wait to take the jade box, and immediately lifted the ban on the jade box. After checking it carefully, he nodded and said, It's right. After he finished speaking, he looked at the Zifu cultivator who delivered the goods for him and thanked him, Senior Lao. No trouble, no trouble. If there is such a good thing in the future, just call me more. My name is Zheng Heng. This Zifu cultivator named Zheng Heng bowed his hands politely, and did not look down on Qin Daoxian because of his low cultivation. Seeing him looking at him eagerly, Qin Daoxian immediately took out a storage bag from his waist, handed it over and said, This is the spirit stone I prepared, Senior, please take a look. Heard the words. Zheng Heng took the storage bag without hesitation, immersed his consciousness into the storage bag in front of the two of them and counted them. It doesn't take a moment. Zheng Heng raised his head, smiled and cupped his hands. Yes, it is exactly 10,000 spirit stones. Qin Daoxian hurriedly returned the salute. Zheng Heng nodded, greeted the red-haired monk surnamed Zhang, and disappeared in front of the two of them. Watching Zheng Heng leave, Qin Daoxian bowed his hands to the red-haired monk surnamed Zhang and said, That being the case, it is time for the junior to return to the West Defense Zone to sit in town. The red-haired monk nodded and said, Walk slowly, no delivery. Farewell. Say it. Qin Daoxian flew towards Jianghu Island together. This time, Qin Daoxian had to go back and digest it properly in order to exchange his military exploits for various resources. To his surprise, the price of high-level exercises is too expensive. But fortunately in Wuxia, monks actually have a way to get high-level exercises. The practice of Qinyuan sword sect undoubtedly gave the lowest-level scattered cultivators a ladder to high-level cultivators. This is also the reason why, for 400 years, there has been an endless stream of middle and high-level cultivators. Less than half a day. Qin Daoxian converged and landed on the spiritual vein of the Qin family on Jianghu Island. Feeling the abundant aura of the second-order spiritual veins, Qin Daoxian couldn't help showing a smile on his face. The consciousness swept away without alarming anyone. Qin Daoxian hurried straight towards the clan. Chongping No. 1 Xiuxin Primary School. The second batch of Ximiao of Fuzi generation has been in school for half a year. Chronology. In addition to Qin Xianhe, an old teacher who has been here all the year round, young Taoist monks often come to the clan as a guest teacher to teach all kinds of knowledge to the children of Fuzi. On the contrary, it was Qin Daoxian because he was busy in the family. In the past 2 years, there are only a handful of hours in the ethnology. Even the kendo classes and talisman classes he taught were often absent due to lack of teachers. Kendo class is fine. Qin Xianhe can temporarily substitute. After all, Qin Xianhe has been immersed in the wind-chasing sword art for a lifetime, and has already reached the realm of culmination. Pointing at the cultivator of the Fuzi generation who doesn't understand anything, there is still no problem. Talisman-making class, there is no monk in the Qin family who can replace Qin Daoxian. Because other than Qin Daoxian, the Qin family did not have any monks who knew how to make magic charms. At the moment, when Qin Daoxian walked to the door of the classroom, Qin Xianhe was teaching kendo lessons on his behalf. The essence of wind-chasing sword art lies in a quick word. Qin Xianhe said and took out a red shadow flying sword from the storage bag. The red shadow flying sword circled above everyone's heads under his control. Not for a while. The red shadow flying sword turned into a phantom, which could not be seen clearly. When the flying sword is approaching a certain level, it will not only increase its power, but also make the enemy hard to guard against. If you cultivate to the extreme before the cultivator's consciousness can react, your flying sword has already taken off the opponent's head. The words fall. The flying sword suddenly disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. In the next instant, the flying sword suddenly appeared in front of the forehead of a monk of the blessing generation, and hovered suddenly. Wow! In the classroom, the monks of the Fu character generation clapped their hands, and a thunderous applause erupted. Ha ha ha! Seeing this scene, Qin Xianhe stroked his beard and laughed happily. Compared with the boring and complicated knowledge of alchemy and alchemy, the flying sword class always makes it easier for the monks of the blessing generation to feel obsessed. Unfortunately, Qin Daoxian, who set up this course, did not seriously teach a few kendo lessons to monks of the Fuzi generation from beginning to end. Outside the classroom, Qin Daoxian couldn't help laughing when he saw such a harmonious scene between the old and the young of the Qin family. On campus, Qin Xianhe and Qin Daoxian walked side by side on the avenue of the campus. Your breath-holding technique is getting more and more powerful. Standing by my side, I didn't even know you were back. Qin Xian Hitsong Lao's face was full of complicated colors. Qin Daoxian smiled and said, "It's not that my breath-holding technique is excellent, it's that Uncle 13 is too serious in your teaching, and that's why you didn't realize that I came back." Heard the words. Qin Xianhe smiled and waved his hand. "Don't console me, I'm not a child, haha." After finished speaking, the conversation changed. "By the way, how did the medicine pills you sell to the front line sell well? Half of it is settled with spirit stones, and half of it is with military merit, for a total of 53,500 great merits. So much." Qin Xianhe glanced at him in surprise, calculated a little and nodded. "So, we made a profit, although one small merit can be exchanged for one spirit stone, but if you want to use spirit stone to buy battle merit, you have to pay a lot of premium." "Indeed." Qin Daoxian nodded. Immediately he took out a jade box and said with a smile, "By the way, I bought you a gift for Uncle 13 on this trip." Seeing this, Qin Xianhe paused slightly. He took the jade box handed over by Qin Daoxian with a surprised look, and slowly opened it after the restriction was lifted. "I see. A red, jade-like spiritual fruit, lying quietly in the jade box. 1,000. Millennium vermilion fruit?" Qin Xian's voice trembled slightly, and looked at Qin Daoxian suddenly, not knowing what to say. Daoxian thought that my Qin family still needs Uncle 13 to work for the family for a while. After finished speaking, he looked at Qin Xianhe with a smile on his face. Heard the words. Qin Xianhe was in a very complicated mood. If you ask Qin Xianhe if he is afraid of death, he must be afraid of death. Anyone who is still conscious is not afraid of death. But let Qin Xinhe sacrifice his family interests in exchange for his survival, he would rather die. Just. Qin Xinhe knew that this jade box contained not only the interests of the family, but also Qin Daoxuan's affection for him. I accepted your gift. Qin Xinhe breathed a sigh of relief, raised his head and said with a smile. Heard this? Qin Daoxian breathed a sigh of relief. Although he bought this Millennium Vermilion fruit without the knowledge of Uncle 13, who knew its price, was likely to sell it. Because in Qin Xian's opinion, it is unwise to spend more than 1 million spirit stones for his family, who is destined to be unable to build a foundation. But Qin Xinhe also knows that in this world, not everything can be measured by interest. Is like Qin Daoxuan's feelings for him. He has always taught Qin Daoxian to have feelings for the family since he was a child, and not to abandon the family. Of course, it also includes feelings for him, Qin Xinhe. If Qin Daoxian is in the interest of the family, he can give up Qin Xinhe. Then one day will he also give up the entire family for profit? Thinking of this, Qin Xinhe was naturally relieved. He felt that his teaching to Qin Daoxian was successful. In these years, Qin Daoxuan's actions have lived up to his earnest teachings, the expectations of the Qin family's ancestors, and the Qin family's younger generations. So, what was his reason for rejecting this gift? Chapter 171. Twin Lakes Island. In Qin Daoxuan's spirit palace. In front of Lingtan. Qin Daoxian crossed his knees on the futon made by Wenyu, slowly closed his eyes, and his consciousness sank into the sea of consciousness space. In the sea of consciousness space. In the most central position, the golden scriptures seem to be immortal and towering mountains, suppressing the sea of knowledge space. Surrounding the golden scriptures are 9 faint stardust. They chase each other, keep spinning, mysterious and beautiful. Deeper in the sea of knowledge space, there are clusters of light-emitting rays of light. These light clusters store all the knowledge Qin Daoxian has learned in his past and present life. There are professional knowledge of machinery in the past life, as well as the knowledge of exercises, swordsmanship, tool refining, alchemy and talisman practice in this life and so on. These clusters of light vary in size. But there are 7 light groups, which are a bit out of tune with the other light groups, as if they were forcibly stuffed into the sea of consciousness space. Qin Daoxian knew. The knowledge stored in these 7 light groups is precisely what the red-haired cultivator surnamed Jianghu held in the arc shadow disk and forcibly stuffed it into his sea of consciousness. Among them, including the exercise that Qin Daoxian will practice next, Qin Yuan Sword Classic. Take a deep breath. Qin Daoxian sank his consciousness into the light group that reproduced the Qin Yuan Sword Sutra. Next second, Qin Daoxian only felt that his head suddenly exploded. Countless mysterious exercises and profound meanings rushed towards him like a tide. Qin Daoxian restrained his mind, and accepted and absorbed the knowledge of these exercises as if they were swallowed whole. Otherwise, it is not easy for him to comprehend the Qin Yuan Sword Classic by himself. Qin Daoxian knew that the more top-level exercises, the more difficult it would be to cultivate. The difficulty here, the first level, is the comprehension of the exercises. Some cultivators at the foundation establishment stage, even if they have obtained top-level exercises, cannot even understand the most basic understanding, let alone start practicing. Qin Daoxian has the assistance of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, and he has never been afraid of single understanding. With the complete reading of the Qin Yuan Sword Sutra foundation building exercises content, Qin Daoxuan's face became a little weird. The road to the strongest sword cultivation recorded in the Qin Yuan Sword Classic is much more detailed than the introduction to the swordsmanship jade slip given by Zhou Mubai. In this practice, it mentions a concept called limit states. The so-called limit state is the limit quality that the cultivator can achieve in the cultivation base, true qi, true essence, and mana. For example, when Qin Daoxian was in the qi refining period, he used the sword intent to temper his true qi. Compared with the qi refining cultivator of the same cultivation level, it is 3 times stronger. This state is called the limit state by the Qin Yuan Sword Classic. To reach this limit state, sword intent tempering is just one of the means. Some monks have talents that other monks cannot envy, such as various spiritual bodies and treasures. This special physique, after cultivating the exercises of the corresponding attributes, will also have a tempering effect on one's own true qi, true essence and mana. For example, Yang family Tinjiao Yang Gongwan's water spirit body has this kind of tempering effect. However, compared with Jian Xiu's sword intent, the tempering effect is slightly worse. If there is a person who possesses this kind of spiritual body and comprehends the sword intent, wouldn't that be able to double temper his own true essence, so as to achieve the effect that his true essence surpasses the mana of the cultivator of Zifu? But in fact, it is true that double tempering can be achieved, but the effect of the second tempering will be greatly reduced. A foundation-building cultivator, no matter how tempered his true essence is, will not exceed the mana of even the most common Zifu cultivator. At most, it can only reach 70% to 80% of the mana of the cultivator of Zifu. The true essence of this state is described as the ultimate true essence in the Qianyuan Sword Sutra. There are not many ways to achieve this ultimate true essence. One is as mentioned above, with both a spirit body and sword intent in the foundation building stage, and under double tempering this limit state can be reached. There is one more. Just like Qin Dao Xian, although he does not have a spiritual body, he has already tempered his true qi with sword intent during the qi refining period. The background is even more than that of other swordsmen. There is also a chance to reach this ultimate true essence. But no matter how monstrous the cultivator is, no matter how many times he tempers his true essence, he can only reach this limit state of true essence at most. Because of the so-called limit state true essence, if one step forward, it will transform into the mana of the Zifu cultivator. It is impossible for the real essence to be stronger than the mana. It is far stronger than mana, which proves that it has transformed into mana. Seeing this, Qin Daoxuan's previous thought that true yuan would grow infinitely under the tempering of sword intent shattered like a bubble. How can there be such a detailed explanation for the ordinary foundation building exercises, the value of these 10,000 great gong flowers? Qin Daoxian grinned. Some doubts about the foundation building stage cultivation in the past were all solved at this moment. As Qin Daoxian continued to watch Qianyuan Sword Sutra, he stood up from time to time and paced the courtyard in excitement. From time to time, he gestured in his hands, verifying his previous conjectures about cultivation at the foundation establishment stage. At this moment, he really realized the gap between top-level exercises and ordinary foundation-building exercises. After the sword cultivator understands the sword intent, he can actually create his own sword art. Seeing this content recorded in the Qianyuan Sword Classic, Qin Daoxuan's eyes lit up. He suddenly remembered. When he and Zhou Mubai were investigating Lotus Island together, they were trapped in a great formation of corpses and blood. The sword trick that Zhou Gol finally burst out, he seems to have never seen it in the exchanged jade slips of Qianyuan Jianzong. Think of this. Qin Daoxian took out the exchanged jade slip of Qianyuan Jianzong from the storage bag again. Looking through it carefully again, I didn't find the Qinglian sword art that Mubai used. Think so. This Qinglian sword art should have been created by Zhou Mubai himself. Zhou Mubai's sword intent realm had long since broken through the invisible realm, reaching the second-level visible realm, and he had walked a considerable distance from the second-level visible realm. It is estimated that they are almost touching the threshold of the third heavy sword intent. Compare. When Qin Daoxian was building the foundation, his kendo realm advanced greatly, but he just crossed the threshold of the tangible realm. Until now, his kendo level was still far behind Zhou Mubai's. However, Qin Daoxian was not discouraged. After all, compared with Zhou Mubai, the age gap between the two is too big. Qin Daoxuan's own kendo talent may be far inferior to Zhou Mubai, but with the blessing of Hong Meng Enlightenment Classic, he believes that his kendo talent is no less than that of any kendo genius in the world. This is called lack of talent, plugins to make up. Call. After reading the entire contents of Qianyuan Sword Classic, Qin Daoxian breathed a sigh of relief. Just wait for tomorrow. After accumulating 10 star dusts, he began to comprehend this practice, and when he was thoroughly comprehended, he would begin to practice the Qianyuan Sword Sutra. For monks, converting to practice is a very troublesome thing. The lower the cultivation base, the smaller the price paid for switching to the cultivation technique. It is basically a common choice for all people to switch to practice during the foundation building period. Generally, the exercises cultivated by monks in the Qi period are some non-attribute peace exercises. Although the power is average, they are better than neutral and peaceful. When the foundation is established, there is no obstacle to switching to other exercises. But if the cultivator cultivated to the Purple Mansion or even the Jindan cultivation base, and then wanted to switch to the cultivation method, the price to pay would be huge. According to legend, there was once a Jindan cultivator who was moved after he got a practice that was especially suitable for him. Then he chose to switch to this practice. As a result, it took nearly 50 years of time before and after the practice to completely turn around. To know 50 years is quite a long time even for a Jindan cultivator. After all, Jindan cultivator's lifespan is only 800 years old. And this cultivator must have spent hundreds of years cultivating to the golden core stage. That is to say, the life essence he actually has left is only a few hundred years. 50 years of time were wasted all at once, just to switch to another practice, and there was no progress in the cultivation during this time. Perhaps, this Jindan cultivator completely lost the opportunity to break through the nascent soul stage because of the practice of cultivation. How big the loss is, any cultivator with a slightly clearer mind can measure it. Of course, the cost of switching to cultivation techniques during the foundation establishment period is much lower. In particular, the exercise that Qin Daoxian cultivated during his qi refining period was Guiyuan Gong, which was praised as the most suitable foundation for Wanxinghai. It is easier to switch to other exercises. Normally, as long as Qin Daoxian comprehends the Qinyuan Sword Sutra thoroughly, he will be able to convert the practice in about a year. By the time, he can improve his cultivation level again and move towards a higher cultivation level. Of course, the fact that he cannot improve his cultivation this year does not mean that his strength cannot be improved. In fact, Qinyuan Sword Sutra, as a top-level sword cultivator exclusive exercise, can also increase the true essence of sword cultivators like other attribute exercises. Help Jiangxi's true essence reach the limit faster. Qin Daoxian estimated that after the complete revision of the Qinyuan Sword Sutra, the strength of his true essence could increase to 70% to 80% at most. But this 70% to 80% is not achieved overnight, but increased step by step in the process of converting to cultivation techniques this year. So, the following year, although his cultivation can't be improved, his strength will not stop like the period of time when he was polishing his true essence. In front of Lingtan, Qin Daoxian once again restrained his mind and slowly polished his true essence, which was almost like an arm's finger. So, the night has passed. Looking at the white fish maw in the sky, the first rays of sunshine shone on his handsome face, setting him off as if a fairy was in the world. Qin Daoxian opened his eyes. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Subsequently, he recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra, silently again. If you think about it carefully, he has probably been reciting this scripture since the first time he lit up the sea of consciousness. It has been more than 10 years. But since he discovered the function of Hongmeng Enlightenment Daojing, to store understanding, he has really risen all the way. It can be said that at least 8 of his achievements today are due to this golden scripture. But today, after Qin Daoxian silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, his face suddenly changed dramatically. Chapter 172. How could this be? Qin Daoxian looked inside the sea of consciousness space. 10 stardust spun and chased, but after accumulating 10 stardust, the force that would attract each other disappeared. Even Qin Daoxian consciously controlled 10 stardust to collide together. Next second, the 10 stars will be scattered again. How could this be? Qin Daoxian muttered. His first reaction was that the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic's ability to store understanding had disappeared. But then he felt something was wrong. If the ability of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic to store comprehension disappears, how can the 10 stardust be explained? After all these years of constant meditation on the scriptures, Qin Daoxian also has his own understanding of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. These stardust accumulated in the space of his sea of consciousness are the concretization of his understanding when he usually recites scriptures silently. Qin Daoxian didn't know what kind of power the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic actually had, and he could even concretize something as ethereal as comprehension. But this does not prevent him from using this function of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. But now there is a problem with this function. This makes Qin Daoxian, who has been relying on it for a long time, indifferent. Take a deep breath. Qin Daoxian began to analyze it carefully. Now that the stardust is still there, it proves that the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic still has the ability to store understanding. The inability to merge into one means that it can no longer make Qin Daoxian realize. And he couldn't get an epiphany, and it was divided into 2 situations. First, in the future, it will be impossible to have an epiphany, no matter how much insight is stored in the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. Second, the threshold of epiphany has been raised. Think of this. Qin Daoxian's eyes lit up slightly. That's right, just like a monk's cultivation will be promoted. Qin Daoxian silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic for so many years, and there will be new breakthroughs. Just like when he recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic for so many years, it only showed the ability to store his understanding. If the ability to store comprehension first appeared, the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic was at the first level. Now, it is very likely that his Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic has broken through to the second level. Right. Probably. Qin Daoxian thought. The confidence in his heart became more and more sufficient. This Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic is good everywhere, except for one thing without any explanation. Even if he made a breakthrough, if it wasn't for the fact that these stardusts were no longer fused together, he still couldn't find any changes. In Qin Daoxian's cognition, it was like an inexplicable existence that never explained but remained firm. Whether it's exactly what I guessed, it depends on tomorrow's situation, Qin Daoxian said silently. The next day, Qin Daoxian recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic again. After a stick of incense, another stardust was added to the Sea of Consciousness space, and the number of stardust exceeded 10, reaching an unprecedented 11. Sure enough. Seeing this scene, Qin Daoxian breathed a sigh of relief. Can continue to store comprehension. Things proved to be very consistent with his guess. That is, the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic has broken through to a new level. The threshold for epiphany has been raised. There are pros and cons to raising the threshold of epiphany. The downside is that, as a result, there will be fewer epiphanies in the future. In the past, it was a 10-day storage of comprehension and an epiphany. Now I don't know how long I have to store my comprehension to get an epiphany. But the advantage is definitely that the effect of the epiphany is stronger. Previously, it was only possible to store up to 10 stardust. Within a stick of incense, the comprehension is increased tenfold. Although the effect is strong enough, it is compared to Qin Daoxian's increasingly terrifying Kendo realm. This epiphany effect is no longer as exaggerated as it was at the beginning. Although his Kendo level is still improving with the epiphany once every 10 days, the speed of improvement is definitely not as fast as when he first set foot on Kendo. When Qin Daoxian just practiced wind-chasing sword art, it was a small success with 1 epiphany and 3 epiphanies. After a few more epiphanies, you will directly reach the state of perfection. This kind of terrifying effect is estimated to scare people who don't know the inside information. But as his Kendo level continues to improve, the effect of epiphany is also waning. In fact, it is not that the epiphany effect has weakened. But his Kendo realm is advanced, and the difficulty of cultivation is getting more and more difficult. In fact, in the eyes of other swordsmen, the speed of his Kendo realm's progress was simply terrifying. The entire Wuxia, who can be like him when he is only in his 20s, the sword intent has reached the second tangible state. Others who succeed in building a foundation in their 20s will be hailed as geniuses. To be able to become a sword cultivator in his 20s is a genius among geniuses, a monster-like existence. In his 20s, the sword intent has reached a tangible state, and it is not clear whether there will be any newcomers, but he, Qin Daoxian, is absolutely unprecedented. Time passes day by day. Qin Daoxian pressed patience. In addition to polishing the real essence every day, Ji taught the Qin family's blessing immortal seedlings in the clan. The main course he took was Kendo class. Compared with Qin Xinhe, Qin Daoxian's understanding of Kendo is not known by many levels. He explained the basics of Kendo to all the immortals, and he did not know how much more thorough it was than Qin Xinhe. Down these days, Qin Daoxian actually found a few good seedlings in Kendo in this batch of immortal seedlings. This is the gap between him and Qin Xinhe. Even though Qin Xinhe has cultivated the wind-chasing sword art to the realm, his understanding of wind-chasing sword art is based on a quick word. Not to mention his other insights into Kendo. And Qin Daoxian, whether it is his comprehension of wind-chasing sword art or covering rain sword art, even surpassed those who created these two sword art. With his current Kendo realm, wanting to create this level of sword art is simply a matter of randomness. Those first-order swordsmanships that he thought were incomparably esoteric in the past. Judging from today's eyes, it seems like a child's painting, which is laughable. So, 20 days have passed. In front of Ling Tan and Ling Fu. A stick of incense time. Qin Daoxian silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, again. In the Sea of Consciousness space. 30 stardust exudes faint starlight, constantly revolving around the golden scriptures. This time, Qin Daoxian finally felt the familiar attraction between Xingqian again. See, the corner of Qin Daoxian's mouth couldn't help but evoke a smile. He no longer controls the stardust, allowing them to smash together. Next second. A sense of shock as if the world had opened up completely drowned Qin Daoxian's consciousness. If there are outsiders present, you will find 2 lines of tears falling from Qin Daoxian's eyes. This is the shock and emotion after having a glimpse of the corner. There has never been a moment when Qin Daoxian felt that he was so close to Dao, as if he stretched out his hand and could grab each other. But soon, Qin Daoxian's consciousness regained clarity. He knew that the feeling just now was just an illusion caused by a sudden increase in understanding. Just like when he first broke through the foundation building stage, he felt that he could pierce the sky with a single sword. Looking at the countless light clusters floating in the sea of consciousness, Qin Daoxian immediately chose to comprehend the Qianyuan Sword Classic. The Qianyuan Sword Sutra, which was still obscure in his eyes before, seems to be as easy as 1 + 1 at this moment. Less than a dozen breaths. He thoroughly understood all the contents of the Qianyuan Sword Sutra during the foundation period. Not only that, on this basis, Qin Daoxian discovered a cultivation method that was more suitable for him. In other words, in just a dozen or so breaths, he discovered a way to improve the Qianyuan Sword Sutra to be more suitable for him. To know. The Qianyuan Sword Section Sect Practice Method, Qianyuan Sword Classic, has undergone tremendous changes from the original version passed down by Cheng Jinxian after countless generations of talented monks have improved and perfected it. But these changes are the accumulation of the Qianyuan Jianzong monks from generation to generation. It is the crystallization of their wisdom. And now, Qin Daoxian has crystallized the wisdom of countless generations and made improvements and adjustments that suit him in just a dozen breaths. To be able to achieve this level, Qin Daoxian must be required to have an extremely profound understanding of this foundation-building period, Qianyuan Sword Classic, and himself, replaced with the previous accumulation of 10 Stardust Epiphany once. It is impossible to achieve the present effect. Even if the Epiphany time is extended to an hour, it cannot be done. This is the threshold of understanding and not simple time can make up for. Thinking that there is still a long time before a stick of incense, Qin Daoxian was unwilling to waste it. After all, it was an epiphany opportunity that he had painstakingly accumulated for a month. Think of this. He was once again immersed in another group of light. This light group is loaded with knowledge about the Fourth Order Mountain Protection Formation. It was impossible for him to understand this Fourth Order formation because of Qin Daoxian's formation skills. But this time, he surprisingly understood. Not ignorant but really understand, although the speed of understanding is very slow. But he knew the principle of arranging this formation, and even knew how to raise his formation level to the 4th level. Just when he was immersed in it and felt overjoyed, the epiphany came to an abrupt end. This moment, Qin Daoxian felt like he had fallen from the sky to the earth. This feeling was a bit more uncomfortable than before, but fortunately he had experienced countless epiphanies before, and quickly overcame this sense of loss. After an epiphany, I actually comprehended about 30% of this mountain protection formation, which is simply too unexpected. Qin Daoxian said happily. Originally he was counting on it, relying on 10 times the epiphany to slowly grind, to see if it took a few years to arrange this formation. If it still doesn't work, then Qin Daoxian could only take the second way. Hua Zhangong invited a 4th Order formation mage to come to Jianghu Island and Sequoia Island to arrange the formation. It's just that there are too many secrets on Jianghu Island. If there is no other way, Qin Daoxian does not want outsiders to set foot here. Didn't expect this time. The Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic broke through to the 2nd level, and 10 times the comprehension became 30 times the comprehension. The effect of epiphany increases. The 4th Order formation that used to be a problem is no longer a problem now. Even with his ability of 30 times his comprehension, he will soon be able to become a 4th Order array mage. To become a 4th Order array mage with a foundation-building cultivation, this has never happened in the world of immortals. Look at the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, in the Sea of Consciousness space. Qin Daoxian secretly said, "I don't know what kind of surprises you will give me in the future." Chapter 173, Chongping No. 1 Xiaoxin Primary School. Inside the classroom. Standing on the podium, Qin Daoxian looked at the little cultivators of the blessing generation below, with a slight smile on his lips and said, "You all know that the essence of wind-chasing sword art is in a quick word, so how to achieve this quick word, there are who knows, heard." The crowd looked at each other in dismay, and the entire classroom was silent. "Teacher, I know." "Well, tell me." Qin Daoxian looked at the child who was less than 1.2 meters tall. His name is Qin Fuxing, and he is a fairy seedling with the best kendo talent found by Qin Daoxian among this group of people of the blessed generation. Not only that, this Qin Fuxing also has upper spiritual roots, and is the object that the Qin family plans to focus on training. Seeing him raise his hand, Qin Daoxuan's tone softened a bit. Qin Fuxing stood up nervously and said, I think the essence of wind-chasing sword art is not about being fast, but about melting the sword into the wind. Oh. Qin Daoxuan's eyes lit up slightly. Tell me about it specifically. When our cultivators don't use the sword, the Imperial Envoy Fei Jin, they completely rely on infuriating qi to force the flying sword, but in this way most of the power of the flying sword is damaged in the collision with the air. The principle of chasing the wind sword art is to minimize the collision between the flying sword and the air in the process of mastering the sword, to achieve the ultimate state, and even the sword can be melted into the wind, and the sword can be silent. The more Qin Fuxing spoke, the more confident he became, and the apprehension he had just stood up disappeared without a trace, and the whole person was full of confidence in his statement. Okay. Qin Daoxian nodded. Unexpectedly, there are people in our class who have such a profound understanding of wind-chasing sword art. He paused. Then do you know how to melt the sword into the wind? Heard. Qin Fuxing suddenly showed a bitter face. Obviously. This question is a bit out of line. If you want to touch this step, you must at least cultivate the wind-chasing sword art to the realm of mastery. The group of children in front of them had just taken Tong Mai pill to become a first-level qi refining cultivator. Because Qin Fuxing is the key training object of the Qin family, he enjoys core-level training resources. Coupled with his diligent practice, he has already broken through to the second level of qi refining last month. But this younger brother, in the entire second batch of Fuzi generation clansmen, can be counted on one's fingers. Not to mention that someone can cultivate the wind-chasing sword art to the realm of achievement in such a short period of time. To know. Even among the outer disciples of the Qinyuan sword sect, there are only a handful of them who can cultivate the first-order sword art such as wind-chasing sword art to the realm of great achievement within a few years. This kind of person without exception has a very high talent for kendo. You can try to cultivate in the direction of sword repair in the future. Once a first-order sword technique is cultivated to the perfect state during the qi refining period, the possibility of comprehending the sword intent when the foundation is established in the future will be as high as 50% or more. See him posing as if scratching his ears and scratching his cheeks. Qin Daoxian smiled and waved his hand, motioning him to sit down. Then he said to the crowd, the essence of wind-chasing sword art, blending the sword into the wind lies in the subtle manipulation of the true energy attached to the flying sword, everyone. Soon. A kendo class ended in Qin Daoxuan's in-depth explanation for everyone. After class, everyone respectfully saluted Qin Daoxian, and then ran towards the dormitory in a hurry. But Qin Daoxian said, Qin Fuxing, you stay. Heard. Qin Fuxing quickly stopped, looked at his little friend and said, you guys go back first. Okay, goodbye Fuxing, goodbye teacher. Everyone waved to Qin Fuxing and Qin Daoxian and left the classroom. Immediately. Only Qin Daoxian and Qin Fuxing were left in the huge classroom, which seemed a little quiet. A long time. Qin Daoxian was the first to break the silence. I heard from your craftsman teacher, you don't want to take the crafting route? Hearing this sentence, Qin Fuxing lowered his head and tightened his hands slightly. After a while, he raised his head, looked at Qin Daoxian and said, Teacher, I want to be a sword cultivator just like you. Done. He looked at Qin Daoxian with burning eyes. Qin Daoxian smiled slightly. Do you know what Jianxiu is? Qin Fuxing shook his head blankly. Then you still want to be a sword cultivator? Miss? Qin Fuxing said and added, I like it. Seeing his eyes drifting to the flying sword that he used to demonstrate in class, Qin Daoxian said, It is just a magic weapon, a sword repairer. It is not as simple as a simple Imperial Envoy flying sword. This road is much more difficult than becoming an alchemist, a talisman, or even a magician. Maybe you can't set foot on this road with all your life's efforts. Even so, are you willing? Hear this. A hint of hesitation flashed in Qin Fuxing's eyes, but then he threw away the hesitation. He nodded heavily towards Qin Daoxian and said, I would like to give it a try, even if I take my path as a bet. Hear such mature words in the mouth of a 5-year-old child. Even though Qin Daoxian knew that children in this world were generally precocious, he was still a little moved. If you want to become a sword cultivator, kendo talent is important, but unswerving belief is also important. Not even inferior to kendo talent. Because even a person with excellent kendo talent will encounter setbacks and stagnate on the road to Jianxiu. After a year of stagnation, some people may continue to persevere. 10 years, decades? Perhaps the cultivator of the same age has already entered a higher cultivation level, and you are still struggling in the foundation building stage. This pain and depression cannot be sustained without a firm will. Yang family Qinjiao Yang Gongwan was only one step away from comprehending sword intent, and finally gave up. Even though she was for the family to a certain extent, she was moved by external things, and her belief was still not firm enough. Looking at Qin Fuxing's young but tall body, Qin Daoxian said solemnly, "Since you have this confidence as the young patriarch of the Qin family, I will naturally do my best to help you." He paused. "From today onwards, you will come to my house after school every day, heard?" The surprise on Qin Fuxing's face disappeared in a flash. Like an adult, he cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, young patriarch." "Don't be too polite," Qin Daoxian said solemnly. "Since you are interested in swordsmanship from now on, you will focus all your energy on swordsmanship. As for other courses such as weapon refining and alchemy, you can skip it." This? Qin Fuxing couldn't help a little hesitant. He knew that the first batch of the family's children of the blessing character had entered the Feijin factory and the alchemy factory after studying for a year. If there are no accidents, they will enter the two factories after 1 year of study. And he gave up alchemy and tool refining, which meant that he would be completely out of production work, unlike other monks of the blessing generation. From a certain point of view, this is undoubtedly unfair to other people of the Fu family. He hesitated to see him. Qin Daoxian knew what he was thinking and said, "You can't even overcome this grudge in your heart, and you still want to comprehend the sword intent and become a sword cultivator?" Hearing this, Qin Fuxing suddenly felt cold on his back, bowed and said, "Fuxing is taught. Look at him like this." Qin Daoxian nodded with satisfaction. "Come with me." "Yes." Immediately. A flash of light passed by, and the two of them landed in the courtyard where Qin Daoxian usually practiced in a blink of an eye. Feeling the aura in the courtyard far beyond the outside world, Qin Fuxing's little face immediately smiled. "Go back to God." An explosion sounded in his ear, immediately calling his attention back. Qin Fuxing immediately lowered his head. "Where is your seat?" Qin Daoxian stretched out his hand. Qin Fuxing followed Qin Daoxian's fingers and saw a futon made by Wenyu, and immediately sat on it cross-legged. "See." Qin Daoxian nodded and sat on another futon not far away, opposite him. The wind-chasing sword art I taught in class today has several more complicated, but faster ways to practice. Sit cross-legged. Qin Daoxian told Qin Fuxing all kinds of his perceptions of wind-chasing sword art, and his perception of kendo. At this time, in Qin Daoxian's consciousness space, the golden scripture entrenched in the center of the sea of consciousness exudes an inexplicable charm. Under the influence of this charm, Qin Fuxing closed his eyes unconsciously. However, neither Qin Daoxian nor Qin Fuxing himself noticed this strange change. After a stick of incense, Qin Daoxian found that Qin Fuxing seemed to have fallen asleep with his eyes closed, and he was immediately dissatisfied, and his face suddenly turned ashen. "Fuxing!" A loud shout rang in Qin Fuxing's ears. "What?" Qin Fuxing woke up suddenly and looked at Qin Daoxian with a surprised look, feeling a little overwhelmed. Damn it. He actually fell asleep while the young patriarch was preaching, and he slept unconsciously. He secretly complained, this time, the young patriarch must have a very bad impression of him, and he will not even open a small stove to explain kendo for him in the future. Thinking of this, Qin Fuxing couldn't help but feel depressed. But soon he found that his sea of consciousness seemed to have one more thing. Consciousness sinks. In a consciousness sea space with only a little light, a stardust floats quietly in the consciousness sea space, embellishing the light in the center of the consciousness sea even more mysteriously. What is this? Qin Fuxing's face was full of horror. As a monk who had just entered the fairyland, he knew the importance of the sea of knowledge. Once there is a mistake in the sea of consciousness, the consequences are often more troublesome than if there is a problem with the sea of qi and dantian. Think of this. He didn't dare to hide it at all, and immediately told Qin Daoxian the problem of his knowledge of the sea space. "You mean just after you fell asleep, there was a floating stardust in the sea of consciousness space?" Qin Fuxing did not notice that when Qin Daoxian said this, his tone trembled slightly. "Yes, young patriarch, it's in my consciousness sea space." Qin Fuxing nodded. "Come here and let me check." Qin Daoxian beckoned to him. Qin Fuxing walked over without any hesitation, and lowered his young head in front of Qin Daoxian. Qin Daoxian gently placed his palm on top of his head, and then closed his eyes. So, he invaded his divine consciousness into the other party's sea of consciousness space. Thanks to Qin Fuxing's cooperation, The process went smoothly without any resistance. Next moment. Sure enough, he saw a stardust that was exactly the same as his sea of consciousness in Qin Fuxing's sea of consciousness space. It's just that compared to his stardust, Qin Fuxing's stardust is much bleaker. It should be that Qin Fuxing's comprehension is still far from his. Therefore, the stored comprehension, the embodied stardust, will also dim a lot. However, a person's comprehension will continue to rise with the increase of insight and knowledge, and even the improvement of the cultivation base, and it is not static. There is no phenomenon that the cultivator's understanding does not change after the foundation is established, compared with before the foundation is established. In this regard, understanding and spiritual roots are completely different. How Lingzhen was born, there is no special means in this life and it will not change again. An understanding is constantly changing. For example, Qin Daoxian, the perception he has stored now, that is, the star dust in the sea of knowledge, is both bigger and brighter than when he first started. Chapter 175. For 1 month in a row. Qin Daoxian pulled different Qin family members and used various methods to finally arrive at the new function of Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, after breaking through the second layer. Compared to the function of storing perception in the first layer, the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic has a new ability to break through to the second level. Qin Daoxian temporarily downgraded it and called it preaching. And Qin Daoxian thought at first that the stardust that appeared in Qin Fuxing's sea of consciousness was the difference between the Hongmeng Enlightenment scripture and the storage of each other's perception. Actually, the star dust accumulated in Qin Fuxing's mind is the realization of all kinds of knowledge Qin Daoxian instilled into the other party's sea of consciousness through the preaching function. For example, Qin Daoxian is instilling Kendo-related experience and insights into Qin Fuxing. The accumulation of 10 star dusts in Qin Fuxing's sea of knowledge will form an epiphany in Kendo practice after they are merged into an explosion. If Qin Daoxian explained to Qin Daochu his experience and insights about the knowledge of artifact refining, the stardust that appeared in Qin Daochu's sea of knowledge, accumulated 10 stars and merged into one, there would be an epiphany about artifact refining. But whatever. Since the source of this epiphany is from Qin Daoxian, the final effect of their epiphany will not exceed the level of Qin Daoxian. In fact, it is quite normal to think about it carefully. If there is no such restriction, everyone in the Qin family can have an epiphany like Qin Daoxian, which is simply a terrifying thing. The speed of development of the Qin family is actually very fast. Why Qin Daoxian still feels like he is dragging the Qin family to run? The reason is that his strength is growing faster than the Qin family's power expansion. He is now in the early stage of foundation building, but with his Kendo realm with tangible sword intent, his real strength is comparable to that of an ordinary cultivator in the early period of Zifu. Apart from him, the Qin family didn't even have a second foundation building cultivator. There is no need to elaborate on how big the gap is. In the future, with Qin Daoxuan's Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic breaking through to the second level, the ability to store understanding has skyrocketed, and his progress will be faster in the future. And so, the Qin family will become more of a burden to him. Even though Qin Daoxian was reluctant to give up his clan because of his feelings and commitment, it was an indisputable fact that the Qin family held him back. Why are the Qin family working so hard now? In addition to the honor of the family, there is also the reason why the cultivator of the Qin family does not want to become Qin Daoxuan's burden. At this point, seeing Qin Daochu, Qin Daolian, and Qin Daochuan working so hard without a single complaint, Qin Daoxian didn't know how. As long as a dignified person, no one wants to be a burden to others, so is the Qin family cultivator. Including the new generation of monks from the Qin family. They can temporarily live under the wings of Qin Daoxian and the family, but they cannot live under the wing of the family forever. Although Qin Daoxian is the head of the Qin family, he is not the nanny of all the Qin family members. He couldn't be everyone's nanny either. If there is a day when all the Qin clan members become babies to be fed, Qin Daoxian will resolutely give up the family even if he is reluctant to give up. Such a family is not what Qin Daoxian, nor every member of the Qin family wants to see. But helpless. Compared with Qin Daoxian, even if the other cultivators of the Qin family tried their best, not only did they fail to keep up with Qin Daoxuan's pace, but they were pulled further and further by Qin Daoxian. Actually, on the first day Qin Daoxian obtained the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, he knew in his heart that the most suitable person for this golden finger is not to be a family cultivator, but to be an unrestrained loose cultivator. He can join a certain cultivation force, and he does not need to have too deep feelings for outsiders in that force. Once the force is useless to him, he will resolutely abandon it. If this is the case, Qin Daoxuan's current achievements may be much higher than now. At least, he will not rack his brains for the cultivation resources of his clansmen to think about how to use industrialized production to improve the productivity of magical instruments and medicinal herbs. In order to improve this productivity, he will not waste his precious epiphany opportunity to create all kinds of new instruments. If Qin Daoxian joins a certain practice force, he only needs to invest all the opportunities of epiphany into himself. For example, in Kendo, in the understanding of Kung Fu. As for cultivation resources, as long as he shows superior talent, or learns a method of earning spirit stones, whether it is alchemy or weapon refining, it is enough to guarantee his cultivation resources. And so, his strength is definitely stronger than now, and his troubles are definitely less than now. But he is Qin Daoxian, a cultivator of the Qin family whom Qin Xinhe has been teaching since he was rescued from the monster more than 10 years ago. After so many years, Qin Daoxuan's heart was warmed up bit by Qin Xinhe, even if it was made of stone. Whether it was out of Qin Xian's expectations or his own feelings, he could not abandon the family and fly away alone. But the family drag is an indisputable fact. Until today, Qin Daoxian breathed a sigh of relief. He knew that with the preaching function of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, after breaking through the second layer, the cultivator of the Qin family would no longer be his burden, but his help. Qin Daoxuan's Lingfu courtyard. 3 cultivators of the Qin family stood. Among them, the leader is naturally Qin Daoxian himself, and the other 2 are Qin Daochu and Qin Dalian. At this moment, they all stared at Qin Fuxing, who was sitting cross-legged on the warm jade futon. There is a look of anticipation in his eyes. So, a stick of incense, the time has passed. Qin Fuxing slowly opened his eyes, and there was a burst of light in his eyes. Fuxing, how? Qin Daoxian took a deep breath and asked. Qin Fuxing showed a confident smile on his face, nodded and said, "Young patriarch, it's done." "Okay." Qin Daoxian was overjoyed, nodded and said, "Try it." "Yes, young patriarch." Qin Fuxing stood up and bowed to Qin Daoxian. Immediately cast his wind-chasing sword art, after his epiphany. Soon, under his control, the red shadow flying sword turned into a phantom. And what was even more exaggerated was that the chi-chi sound after the red shadow flying sword pierced the air actually disappeared completely. Initially melt the sword into the wind. This is a sign of the completion of the first order wind-chasing sword art. It only took a mere month for Qin Fuxing to achieve it. The speed of kendo progress is no slower than the original Qin Daoxian. Qin Daochu looked at Qin Fuxing with a shocked expression, because in comparison he had practiced the wind-chasing sword art for so many years, and so far he has not broken through to the realm of great achievement. Although there is a reason why he has been focusing on refining. But what I have to say is that he is a cultivator who is about to build a foundation, and his swordsmanship is actually behind a descendant of the second-level chi refining. It is really shameful for him to be an elder. However, he quickly adjusted his mood. Because of this period, through Qin Daoxuan's sermons, his craftsmanship level has improved by leaps and bounds, and so far he has broken through to the level of a second-order craftsman. This terrifying speed of progress is extremely rare among the refiners in the entire Wangxinghai. After all, he has not yet reached the foundation-building stage, and he has already been able to refine the second-order magic weapon. This makes other refiners think. Thinking of this, he looked at Qin Daoxian, grinned and said, "Young patriarch, you are really the big treasure of my Qin family," heard the words. Qin Daoxian looked at him with a dark face, which made him shiver immediately. Seeing him like this, Qin Dalian covered her mouth and laughed softly. In the past month, through Qin Daoxuan's sermon, her level of alchemy has also improved rapidly, and she has almost touched the realm of a second-order alchemist. Remember, my Qin family members can achieve this speed of progress without relying on anything, but relying on their own talent, understand? Qin Daoxian said quietly. Heard the words. The hearts of everyone froze. Immediately afterwards, they all thought about what this terrifying ability meant to a cultivation force. Let's not talk about alchemists and artifact refiners, the logistics personnel who are related to the power of cultivation. It is said that the Qin family can batch manufacture a perverted cultivator whose combat power far exceeds that of the same rank, which makes all the cultivation forces unable to calm down. How rare is sword repair? Looking at the millions of cultivators in the entire Guang'an prefecture, only one sword cultivator, Zhou Mubai, could tell. That is no longer a 1 in million cultivator like Tianlingen cultivator, but the entire mansion, and there is a Qinjiao cultivator like Zhou Mubai. In the entire Zhangzhou there are not many swordsmen. It is true that other prefectures are not like Zhangzhou, which suffered from the rebellion of God and the battle of Zhenangguan, which resulted in the destruction of the talented monks in the prefecture. But the genius of Jiangxi's level is also the top genius in other states. Even in Qianyuan Jianzhong. Once a cultivator has established a foundation, he can comprehend the meaning of the sword and become a sword cultivator, and he can instantly be ranked among the true lineages of the sect. It is conceivable how much gold is contained in Jianxiu. And such an existence. The Qin family might be able to mass production in the future. If this is known to other cultivation forces, the consequences are really hard to guess. Anyway, it must have a greater impact than the Qin family's industrialized alchemy and alchemy. Because of the industrialization of alchemy and alchemy, the only increase is the logistical background of a force. And this, mass production sword repair is directly related to the strength of a practice force. Which is more important is self-evident. In the world of practice, affirming strength is the most important thing. After listening to Qin Daoxuan's words, everyone realized the seriousness of this problem, and immediately swore an oath to never reveal the slightest secret. After Qin Daochu made his vow, he looked at Qin Fuxing as if he were looking at a piece of peerless jade. Unexpectedly, among the cultivators of the Qin Jiafu generation, such a kendo genius can be produced. Aside. Qin Daolian echoed, "Yes, God bless you, my Qin family's junior cultivator is finally full of talents, and one generation is stronger than the other. Qin Fuxing is young after all." I couldn't say these heartfelt words as naturally as Qin Daochu and Qin Daolian, so they had to hold back their face flushed and said, "Fuxing is ashamed, I can't be praised by my uncle and aunt." Heard the words. Everyone looked at each other and all laughed. Chapter 176. In the courtyard. The three bowed their hands to Qin Daoxian and were about to leave. Qin Daoxian stopped Qin Daochu. See. Qin Daolian left with Qin Fuxing first. Watched the two leave. Qin Daochu scratched his head and couldn't help but said, "Young patriarch, you left me, do you have any important tasks to give to me?" Talking. Showing an eager expression. Qin Daoxian smiled and said, "I really have an important task for you." After saying that, his face became serious. "I found a problem from the exchanged jade slips of Qianyuan Jianzhong." He paused. "Whether it is in the auction house of Guang'an Prefecture or in the exchanged jade slips of Qianyuan Jianzhong, the inheritance of offensive instruments is very common, but the inheritance of defensive spirit armor is very rare. You know what that means?" After speaking, he gave Qin Daochu a meaningful look. Qin Daochu didn't understand the meaning of Qin Daoxuan's words and said dumbly, "I don't know." Qin Daoxian sighed and said, "What do you think is the difference in strength between after you put on the spirit armor and before you didn't wear it?" Heard. Qin Daochu frowned, thought about it carefully and said, "The difference in strength is huge, it can even be said to be a world of difference." "That's right." Qin Daoxian looked at the scenery outside the courtyard and said quietly, "Even if I were in the qi refining period facing a group of qi refining monks wearing spirit armor, I'm afraid I would be defeated and run away. Even now, I am besieged by a group of late-stage foundation-building monks with second-order high-grade spirit armor, and there is a risk of being defeated." "How come?" Qin Daochu looked at Qin Daoxian in shock and could hardly believe what he said. In his eyes, Qin Daoxian is a sword cultivator, and his strength is absolutely on the same level. Such a Qinjiao sword cultivator actually said that if a group of cultivators of the same rank were wearing spirit armor, they could pose a threat to him. This obviously had a big impact on Qin Daochu's three views. But immediately he thought that after he was in the first-rank high-grade life spirit armor, with his cultivation level of the 9th level of qi refining, which was close to the great perfection, he was able to withstand the attacks of ordinary monks in the early stage of foundation establishment. Immediately relieved. Compared with the offensive weapons of the flying sword type, the spiritual armor can indeed affect the balance of strength. Therefore, in the exchanged jade slips of Qianyuan Jianzhong, there is no inheritance of high-level spirit armor. In fact, Qin Daoxian exchanged jade slips from Qianyuan Jianzhong and he could smell it. Qianyuan Jianzhong's policy was to suppress the big family and support loose cultivators. At this point, it is estimated that all the big families in Wanxinghai can see it. This is also the reason why the major families under the rule of Qianyuan Jianzhong did not dare to make mistakes at will. The core strategic technology such as high-level spirit armor refining and inheritance, once spread to the big family, will enhance the strength of the family in a very short period of time. A group of monks wearing spirit armor and a group of naked monks holding offensive magic weapons are not the same concept at all. Even if Qianyuan Jianzong is not afraid of this kind of power, the expansion of the power of the big family is too great, and it is always a trouble for it. This kind of trouble, Qianyuan Jianzong had to guard against it. Of course. Although spirit armor is good, the price is also quite impressive. Generally, even the most elite children of large families are qualified to wear spirit armor. Just like the Zhou family and the Wu family. Only the most elite family members have spirit armor. But even the Zhou and Wu families have the highest spiritual armor inheritance, only the second-ranked top grade. Does the Zhou family have no spiritual stone or lack of military exploits? Of course not. This is the reason why Qianyuan Jianzong intends to control the refining technology of spirit armor. Not only the spirit armor refining technology, but also the warlike instruments such as the Lingshu battleship, the Qianyuan sword sect is strictly controlling. The Zhou family's Lingshu battleship was rewarded by the previous suzerain after the Zhou family made great contributions to the Qianyuan Jianzong's unification of the Wangxinghai. But after that, there is no family in Wanxinghai that has obtained a refining method for a weapon of war similar to the Spirit Void battleship. Even the Zhou family has only accumulated less than 100 Spirit Void battleships in the past 1,000 years. You can see the preciousness of this weapon of war. The weapon of war may not have obvious effect when dealing with a single monk, but on the vast battlefield, it is like a godlike existence. For example, Izumo Frontline. Shenqing Dao League used a lot of puppet beast cannon fodder to consume Wanxinghai Cultivator. Facing this kind of cannon fodder, the weapon of war is the best weapon to clear the field. Even now in the war between Guang'an Mansion and Lotus Island Corpse Tide, the Sun brothers did not choose to attack the 4 city gates on a large scale, except for the threat of Zhou Mubai, a perverted sword cultivator. The Zhou family's Spirit Void battleship is also the reason for their fear. This weapon of war, once displayed on a large-scale battlefield, will have a sweeping effect. In addition to the cultivator's quick escape and flexible movement, it is not easy to be locked by this kind of warfare weapon. Others, like the puppet beasts in the Hall of Thousand Machines, and the corpse tide that erupted in Guang'an Mansion, once assembled on a large scale, are simply the living targets of this weapon of war. Therefore, there will be no specific refining inheritance for this kind of war artifact. Of course, for specific instruments, Qianyuan Jianzong is still willing to exchange military exploits, but there are also restrictions. But for loose cultivators there are no restrictions. Loose cultivators are alone, whether they are exchanging spirit armor or exchanging weapons of war, they generally only exchange one piece. There are no restrictions on this exchange. Qianyuan Jianzong's move restricted the power of big families such as the Zhou family and the Yi family. In the exchange inheritance of Qianyuan sword sect, things that can really increase the family heritage, especially the big family heritage, are generally not available. The inheritance of high-level spirit armor is impressively listed. The inheritance of large-scale war artifacts is also among them. This kind of thing, which is related to the background of a cultivation force, is much stricter than the exchange of exercises. Qin Daoxian rummaged through all the artifact refining inheritances. It also found a refining inheritance of the second-order spirit armor, and the required combat skills are extremely high. Anyway, the military exploits in the hands of the Qin family are simply not enough to exchange. In the courtyard, after Qin Daochu heard Qin Daoxuan's explanation, he immediately understood that the young patriarch's plan was far-reaching. He nodded. After my Qin family cultivators have built a large number of foundations, the current first-order spirit armor will naturally be unable to keep up with the cultivation. Although many foundation-building cultivators do not even have first-order spiritual armor, it does not prevent the Qin family foundation-building cultivators from disliking first-order spiritual armor. That's the truth. Qin Daoxian nodded. Now there are more and more cultivators in my Qin family. In the future, in addition to most people who will enter the factory and put into production work, the military department I plan for the Qin family will definitely start to form. He paused. In my vision, the Qin family cultivators and the military cultivators will be completely separated from the cultivators in charge of production in the future. The monks in the military have only one goal, and do everything possible to improve their own strength to protect the safety of the family. You also know that the components of a cultivator's strength, in addition to his own cultivation, spells, swordsmanship and other realms, are also affected by foreign objects such as instruments. And the impact is huge. Heard? Qin Daochu nodded. As an artifact refiner, he couldn't be more clear about this truth. The two monks with the same cultivation base and little difference in spells and other means, the magical weapon can even be said to be the only factor that affects the outcome of the battle between the two. Among them, Wuxia is the most influential factor. Of the two cultivators in the late stage of qi refining, if one's kendo realm has reached the perfection of the first-order sword art, the other is only at the normal Desheng level, but he has a first-order high-grade spirit armor. The outcome of the battle is self-evident. It must be a qi refining cultivator with a first-order high-grade spirit armor. Because the cultivators in the late stage of qi refining who have reached the perfection of the first-order sword art, have no ability to even break the same cultivation level, but have the ability to defend the cultivator with spirit armor. How can there be any suspense in such a battle? Although the cultivator has reached a higher level, the situation is different. But there is no doubt that the increase in the strength of the cultivator by the spirit armor is too terrifying. It can be said to be the best of all types of instruments. Such inheritance, it is no wonder that Chenyuan Jianzong will deliberately limit it. If there are no restrictions with the financial resources of the various big families in Wanxinghai, all the elite cultivators in the family can wear high-level spirit armor in minutes. At that time, the strength of the big families will increase terribly. Moreover, compared with a pile of loose cultivators, it is easier for large families to form alliances, which is easy to threaten the rule of Chenyuan Jianzong. This point, as long as the high-level minds of Chenyuan Jianzong are a little sober, they will not be caught off guard. So, I want to set up a magic weapon research institute now, which is responsible for the research of various magic tools. The Institute of Magical Instruments? Chen Daochu was not surprised by the new term in the mouth of the young patriarch, but he was a little curious about the difference between the so-called Magic Weapon Research Institute and the Magic Weapon Factory. Hear Chen Daochu's question. Chen Daoxian explained, "Of course there are differences. You should know that I created two magical instruments, the melting furnace and the centrifugal wall breaker, right?" Chen Daochu nodded. "In the future, your Magical Instrument Research Institute will do this job full-time to research new types, especially the special magic instruments that my Chen family needs." What? Hearing this, Chen Daochu's mouth widened in surprise. He is only a second-order weapon refiner, but Chen Daoxian asked him to create a new type of magic weapon. He really wanted to say, "Young patriarch, you are too embarrassing for me." But seeing Chen Daoxuan's serious eyes, he couldn't say these words at all. Seeing his expression, Chen Daoxian, who had brought him up almost from a young age, didn't know what he was thinking. Immediately he said in a bad mood, "You forgot, your current artifact refining talent is not the same as before? The artifact refining talent has improved so much, don't you have any confidence?" "How can I?" Before Chen Daochu finished speaking, he immediately thought of something, and his face suddenly became sullen. Immediately, he was excited and said incoherently, "This is feasible. This is feasible. If the number of talented wizards like me is a little more, this Magic Weapon Research Institute can completely come out." Seeing his brazen boasting like this, Chen Daoxian couldn't even look directly at him. "Okay, don't talk nonsense. You have always been leading the magic weapon class, and you have selected a group of steadfast and reliable monks with a certain talent for refining weapons. Now I will build the team of this Magical Instrument Research Institute for me." "All right." Chen Daochu nodded hurriedly. Chapter 177. The sky above the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture. A spirit void battleship rumbled across the sky and landed in the Zhou family station. Below. A group of Zhou family foundation establishment cultivators are waiting here. Friend Chen has worked hard all the way. A Zhou family foundation building cultivator who was headed by him, cupped his hands towards Chen Daochuan, who flew down from the spirit void battleship and said with a smile, "Senior Zhou is very polite." Chen Daochuan, who had a black short and fine beard at the corner of his mouth, cupped his hands towards the other side and smiled. Seeing the Zhou family cultivator looking at the spirit void battleship behind him from time to time, Chen Daochuan immediately introduced, "Thanks to the supply of raw materials from Guang'an Prefecture Xianqing and Lingtian Xianqing, the number of medicinal pills and magical instruments refined by our Zhou family this month is very high. It has increased again. Senior Zhou, please take a look." Talking. Chen Daochuan directed the other party to check the goods delivered from the Lingshu battleship. Under the guidance of Chen Daochuan, the Zhou family cultivator checked the medicinal pills and magic tools that the Qin family supplied to the front line every month. Following the inspection, the Zhou family foundation establishment cultivator kept nodding his head. Yes, the amount of medicinal pills this month has increased a lot compared to the previous month. It seems that the number of alchemists in your Qin family has increased again. Saying that, the Zhou family cultivator showed a complicated look in his eyes. Senior is too famous. My Qin family also invested all the spiritual stones they earned into training new alchemists. Not only that, but also spent a lot of spiritual stones in the family's inventory. To train an alchemist and a refiner, the initial cost is too high. Qin Daochuan sighed. Yes. Hearing this, the Zhou family cultivator nodded in agreement. Immediately he looked at Qin Daochuan with a smile and said, "But your Qin family is really courageous, and you dare to train alchemists and artifact alchemists at all costs. It seems that in the future Guanganfu medicine market, your Qin family should be yours. Got a seat." Don't dare, don't dare. Qin Daochuan waved his hands again and again. Our Qin family is also tossing around in this place in Guang'an Mansion, which is comparable to your Zhou family's reputation in the entire Cangzhou medicine pill market. Ha 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 ha. This flattery obviously hit the other side's heart, making the Zhou family cultivator laugh out loud. Between the two talking, the monks under his hands have already counted all the goods. A cultivator in the early stage of foundation building stepped forward and reported to the Zhou family deacon headed by him. Reporting to the deacon, there are 3 types of first-order low-grade elixir brought by the Qin family this time. Among them there are 143,000 Jidu pills, 100,000 Posha pills, and 94,500 Huichi pills, for a total of 337,500 pills. There are also 5,000 first-order low-grade flying swords and 2,400 first-order middle-grade flying swords. The above goods have a total value of 3,865,000 spirit stones. Hearing this report, the Zhou family deacon nodded, indicating that he knew. How about it, fellow Daoist Qin, still follow the previous payment method? Yes, half of it is settled by military merit. Qin Daochuan cupped his hands and laughed. Tisk. Zhou family deacon shook his head, his eyes full of envy. This time, although your Qin family is in the back, you have really gained a lot of military exploits. Fortunately, it can't compare to Senior Zhou Mubai. It is said that a few days ago, Senior Zhou Mubai led the monks in the East Defense Zone to break through a second-order Yin vein transformed by the corpse group on Lotus Island, killing nearly 1 million zombies. Dao Yu Qin is really well informed. There is this matter. Deacon Zhou said this. His face was full of uncontrollable joy. The successive victories in the East Defense Zone meant that the rear of Guang'an Prefecture became more and more stable. To know, the East Defense Zone is only a part of the entire Guang'an Prefecture coalition, not even half of it. In the rear of Guang'an Prefecture, for defense zones were also set up. Except for the weakest western defense area, the other defense areas are not weak. If every defense area is full of soldiers, at least 1 million monks can be assembled. Coupled with the Zifu cultivators who sit in each defense area, they are a very powerful reserve force. As for the sneak attack by the Lotus Island Corpse Group, it is even more impossible. At this moment they are being defeated by the coalition forces in the East Defense Zone, and they can't even protect themselves. How can they have the strength to split up and attack the rear of Guang'an Mansion? Besides, the rear of Guang'an Mansion is not a soft persimmon. By doing so they will only die faster. With Sun Fu's shrewdness he would definitely not make such a stupid decision. Sequoia Island, Guanhai Xianqing. Above the city wall. Qin Daoxian and Qin Xinhe stood side by side. Uncle 13, how is it? Looking at the fourth order formation that he arranged with his own hands, Qin Daoxian said proudly. Not bad. Qin Xinhe couldn't help but nodded. If only I could arrange a formation like this from the spiritual veins of the Qin family, heard. Qin Daoxian frowned slightly, then shook his head and said, "It is not difficult to arrange the fourth order formation, but the difficulty is how to bring out the power of this fourth order formation. Guanhai Xianqing has a third order spiritual vein as its power source, and my Qin family spiritual vein is only second order, and it is difficult to meet the requirements of arranging a fourth order array. Wait a few more months until my Qin family has accumulated 10 million spirit stones, and after promoting the spirit veins to the third order, it will not be too late to set up the fourth order mountain protection formation." Speaking of this, Qin Daoxian laughed. Once the fourth order mountain protection formation is arranged, my Qin family will have the foundation of a big family. You must know that the Fourth Order Mountain Protection Formation can resist even a Jindan cultivator. If the person guarding the formation has the Zifu cultivation base, he can completely block the attack of a Jindan cultivator. Hear this. Qin Xinhe couldn't help feeling filled with emotion. Once upon a time, the Qin family didn't even have a single spiritual vein, and even spending 500 spirit stones to buy a Tongmai pill had to think twice. And now, he and Qin Daoxian are actually discussing the promotion of the Third Order spiritual veins in this open-minded discussion. Really all the time. By the way, in order to build this immortal city, it cost you nearly 60 million spirit stones. I heard that the military salaries in the Western Defense Zone are about to be dispersed? Do you need your family to help you make up for this part of the spirit stones? Qin Xinhe turned his head, looked at Qin Daoxian and asked. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian turned to look at the increasingly prosperous Guanhai Xianqing, smiled slightly, shook his head and said, "No need, Uncle 13, just watch it." Although I don't know what the Qin Daoxian is up to. But Qin Xinhe, who knew him well, knew that whenever Qin Daoxian showed such an expression, the problems encountered by the Qin family would be solved easily. I believe this time will be no exception. Guanhai Xianqing, as the third large immortal city built by Guang'an Prefecture, is different from the square city built by other foundation-building families. First, it was built on a third-order spiritual vein worth over 10 million spiritual stones. Secondly, the blocks, lingfu, shops, roads and other buildings in Xianqing were all carefully designed by a Yang family construction master who was responsible for building Lingrui City. No way. Although Qin Beiwang of the Qin family is a senior general, he is a mortal who has no experience in building immortal cities. Not to mention other issues. Just because Qin Beiwang didn't understand the shortcoming of the formation method completely disqualified him from building the fairy city. After all, immortal cities are different from mortal cities. There are all kinds of monks living in it, so the requirements for the formation of its internal buildings are very high. For example, in an inn, it is necessary to arrange various formations that sound insulation and prevent the mutual interference of aura. Stores in Xianqing should also arrange various alarm formations to prevent people from making trouble in the store. Merchants can even invite law enforcement members of the family in charge to preside over justice for them. Besides, like some kind of spiritual palace that supplies monks to practice, the forbidden air formation that makes monks forbid flying in the air. All need to build arrays. You must know that the arrangement of the formation is not empty-handed, and it can be done by drawing a few circles against the air. To arrange it, you need a lot of array materials. The Fourth Order Mountain Protection Formation arranged by Qin Daoxian is like this, and the various buildings in Guanhaixin City are still like this. The price of 1 or 2 copies of these array materials may not be high, but if you add it up, the price of a whole immortal city is a bit jaw-dropping. According to Qin Daoxian's plan, this fairy city is far from finished. 1/10 of the space reserved inside has just been used up. When the reserve space is fully built, it is estimated that the current population of monks in the West Defense Zone will be far from being filled. Although the Western Defense Area is also one of the 5 defense areas, except for those cultivators who were too close to Sequoia Island, except for the original clan in the dojo. The other monks were more willing to run to the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture and immortal city of Lingri. After all, in those places there are cultivators of Zifu. Although the cultivators of Guang'an Mansion knew that the sword was powerful, in their eyes, the sword cultivators of the foundation building period were far less powerful than the cultivators of Z Mansion. In addition, the front line of the East Defense Zone is now victorious. The cloud over everyone's heads gradually dissipated. Naturally, there is no reason for everyone to run to the backward, Guanhai Xianqing. As a result, in addition to the 100,000 soldiers who were stationed in the army, Guanhai Xianqing also had less than 300,000 scattered cultivators and family cultivators stationed here. Compared with the gathering of millions of monks in the Guang'an Prefecture's sphere of influence, and the gathering of more than 1 million monks in Lingde Immortal City, there is a far cry. Even in the Qingguan Station in the Southern Defense Area, there are more scattered repairers gathered than those in the Western Defense Area. For this phenomenon, Qin Daoxian was not discouraged either. He knows that all treatment comes from strength. Neither the Qin family nor his Qin Daoxian have given the enemy such confidence. Naturally, they didn't dare to drag their families along and put all their bets on the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone. Return to the West Defense Station. Just entered the main hall of the headquarters. A cultivator in spirit armor walked in with strides like the wind. Seeing Qin Daoxian, the cultivator's eyes lit up, and he cupped his hands and said, Master Commander, this month's military salary should be paid. Done. Quite nervously he glanced at Qin Daoxian. Qin Daoxian wants to build a fairy city on Sequoia Island. Many monks in the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone were opposed to it. It's just that as Qin Daoxuan's subordinates, they cannot disobey Qin Daoxuan's orders. At the moment, the problem that the group of monks worried about at the beginning finally happened. The coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone have begun to fail to pay the soldiers of the coalition army. Chapter 178. Since the Western Defense Zone coalition forces garrison Sequoia Island, it's like running out of money. If it wasn't for Zhou Mingho, the commander of the Guang'an Prefecture's coalition forces, in order to win over Qin Daoxian, and the Qin family actually provided strong logistical support for the front line of the East Defense Zone. In other words, other people dared to embezzle the military expenditure of the Western Defense Zone so arbitrarily. It has long been captured by the Guang'an Prefecture allied forces for corruption and dereliction of duty. Since the garrison of Sequoia Island in the West Defense Zone, not only has a third-order spiritual vein been built, but also more than a dozen second-order spiritual veins have been built on a dozen nearby islands with Sequoia Island as the core, imitating the Zhou family in Guang'an Prefecture Xianming. The pulses are used for loose cultivators and other small families, and is responsible for the patrolling and stopping of the Lingshu battleship. The cost of constructing the spiritual veins alone is as high as more than 20 million spiritual stones. And the huge order for magical instruments from the Qin family cost millions of spirit stones. Afterwards, the construction of Guanhai Xianqing cost a lot of the military expenditure of the Western Defense Zone, and nearly 50 million spirit stones were spent. Arguably, the Guanhai Xianqing built with this money should be owned by the Western Defense Zone coalition army, but anyone with a discerning eye can see it. However, the Qin family assigned its taxation rights to the name of their own family. This is the blatant private use of military spending. Private use of military expenses is not enough. The point is that after spending like this, there is not much left of the original 80 million spirit stone military expenses. Don't talk about doing other things, even paying the soldiers' salaries is a little powerless. Inside the main hall of the headquarters of the West Defense District, Qin Daoxian looked at Lei Zhen, who was standing in front of him with a nervous face, and said with a smile, "Why are you so nervous? My Qin family is on Jianghu Island, a few hundred miles away from Sequoia Island. Are you still worried that my Qin family can't escape?" He shook his head. "Don't worry, this month's military pay, I will pay it out truthfully." After finishing speaking, he waved towards Lei Zhen. When Lei Zhen heard the words, he glanced at his immediate boss with a slight hesitation, and then he cupped his hands and slowly exited the hall. Watching Lei Zhen leave the hall, Qin Daoxian murmured, "After all, Daochuan should be back soon." Young Patriarch. A spirit void battleship descended from the sky. Qin Daochu flew down from the spirit void battleship and immediately bowed his hands when he saw Qin Daoxian. Qin Daoxian looked at Qin Daochuan, who had grown into a grown-up appearance, and couldn't help feeling filled with emotion. At the age of 14, Qin Daochuan was taken by Qin Xinhe to the Feijin shop in Guang'an Prefecture to exercise, and then he took over the business of magic tools in Sangxiafang City in Guang'an Prefecture. By now, Qin Daochuan is already 20 years old. It can be said that Qin Daoxian watched him grow up in front of him little by little. At this moment, seeing the beard growing at the corner of his mouth, he couldn't help feeling emotional. The cultivator of the Qin family's Taoist generation has finally grown up. Not only that, Qin Daochuan also has Zhongling roots, and under the constant cultivation of the Qin family over the years, he has finally reached the 9th level of qi refining. At this rate, it can be as fast as 2 or 3 years and as slow as 10 years. Qin Daochuan can successfully establish a foundation at the age of 30 at the latest and become a foundation-building cultivator. Patting Qin Daochuan's shoulder heavily, Qin Daoxian said with emotion, "It's hard work." Qin Daochuan looked at Qin Daoxian and shook his head with a silent smile. "Come on, let's go in and talk." "Yes, young patriarch." Qin Daochuan cupped his hands and followed Qin Daoxian into the hall. The two sat in separate positions, and Qin Daoxian personally brewed a pot of spiritual tea for him, and the two drank and chatted. About half an hour. Qin Daochuan finally understood why Qin Daoxian transferred him back to Guanhai City Xianqing. Compared with the magic instrument market in Sangxiafang City in Xianqing, Guang'an Prefecture, what the Qin family did in Guanhai Xianqing was really related to the foundation of the Qin family's future. But, What about the Feijin shop in Sangxiafeng City, Guang'an Prefecture? Qin Daochuan frowned and looked at Qin Daoxian. Over the years, the Hongyin Feijin store in Sangxiafeng City, Guang'an Prefecture, has long been more than 2 stores. According to Qin Daochuan, the Qin family now has a total of 6 stores in Sangxiafeng City, Guang'an Prefecture. It completely covers the major blocks of the entire Sangxiafeng City. The types of flying swords in the Hongyin Feijin store have also changed a lot from the beginning. In the past, the Hongyin Feijin store almost only sold the Red Shadow Feijin, a first-order low-grade Feijin. But now, the Hongyin Feijia store not only sells first-order low-grade flying swords, but also the types of first-order low-grade flying swords are no longer limited to the Red Shadow flying sword. Moreover, there are also first-order mid-grade and even first-grade high-grade flying swords for sale. Of course, there are very few people who can afford a first-order high-grade flying sword in the Qi refining period. In addition, even if they had 500 spirit stones in their pockets, they mostly wanted to rent a better cave or buy spirit pills. Instead of choosing to change the magic weapon from the first-order low-grade or the first-grade middle-grade to the first-grade high-grade. This is too extravagant for a loose cultivator in the Qi refining period. Indulge for a moment. Qin Daoxian raised his head and said, "Now, who is in charge of the Feijin shop in Sangxiafeng City, Guang'an Prefecture, besides you?" "Senior Wei Sihai Wei." "It's him?" Qin Daoxian nodded. He still remembered the stall owner he met when he first went to the immortal city of Guang'an Mansion. The last time he was in the Hongyin Feijin shop, he also met each other. Unexpectedly, he has now become the second-in-command of the Hongyin Feijin shop in Sangxiafeng City, Guang'an Prefecture. But it's normal to think about it. When Wei Sihai joined the Hongyin Feijin store. The Hongyin Feijin store opened its first branch not long ago, and there were only 2 people in the store, Qin Xinhe and Qin Daochuan. Now the Qin family has opened 6 branches in Guang'an Prefecture. Of course, the status has risen and it has become a veteran. Qin Daoxian nodded. "In your opinion, how does Wei Sihai behave?" "Heard." Qin Daochuan's heart froze slightly, and he tasted the connotation of Qin Daochuan's words. Qin Daoxian wanted a Wei Sihai to take over the Qin family's business of instruments in Sangxiafeng City, Guang'an Prefecture. Senior Wei is calm and low-key, more credible, but Qin Daochuan expressed his concerns. To be frank, this kind of behavior of completely letting outsiders take over the family business is very rare in the entire Wanxinghai. Because family monks generally cannot lack manpower, they may hire outsiders to help them, but they will never leave the entire business in a fairy city to outsiders. What if Wei Sihai ran away with the money? What if he tried to raise the price of flying swords and corrupt them? There will be many problems here. But compared to these small problems, Qin Daoxian saw further. Here Qin Daochuan's concerns. He explained, "The Hongyin Feijin store was indeed the mainstay of my Qin family's income, but now it is no longer. Whether it's the medicine business between us and the Guang'an Prefecture allied forces, or the magic weapon business, it far exceeds the turnover of the Hongyin Feijin store." Qin Daoxian paused. "Besides, the most important foundation of my Qin family now is Guanhai Xianqing. Only when this Xianqing is managed well can my Qin family truly possess the heritage of a big family. Compared with doing business in someone else's fairy city, how can there be a lot to gain from operating a fairy city exclusively by yourself? As long as the Qin family makes the operation of Guanhai Xianqing prosperous, they don't say anything. The taxation of this Xianqing is enough to make the Qin family fat. Why is the Zhou family so rich? It is not only the various industries of the Zhou family, but more importantly, they owned a huge immortal city that was among the best in the entire Zhangzhou before that, the immortal city of Guang'an. The Guang'an Immortal Alliance built the Lingde Immortal City, and it was the Yang family and other Guang'an families who saw that the largest part of Guang'an's interests was monopolized by the Zhou family, and they were unwilling to form this alliance. Since Guang'an Xianmeng can do this, why can't his Qin family do it? If there is no corpse tied on Lotus Island, Qin Daoxian really dare not make this decision so quickly. But now that the corpse tide broke out on Lotus Island, in order to ensure the internal stability of Guang'an Mansion, the Zhou family agreed to compromise and sell some of their interests to the outside world. The so-called division of the 5 defense zones is not as good as the division of Guang'an Prefecture's interests. The West Defense area of Guang'an Prefecture will be the sphere of influence of the Qin family in the future. His Qin family built a new immortal city on their own site, why not? Of course, building an immortal city is one thing, and whether it can be developed or not is another. The Lingde Immortal City started well, and that was also Yang Lingyuan's pioneering approach to surrounding this immortal city, opening up spiritual fields and planting spiritual veins for scattered cultivators to build. But soon this move was imitated by the Zhou family. Now it is imitated by Qin Daoxian. In this regard, his Qin family does not have any advantages at all, but because of latecomers they are behind others. Moreover, because of the construction of Guanhai Xianqing, the Qin family encountered the same predicament as the Guang'an Xianmeng, and lacked liquidity. That is, the problem of insufficient spiritual stones. You must know that he has not vigorously supported the scattered cultivators to open up spiritual fields and plant spiritual medicines on the more than 10 second-order spiritual veins opened up by his Qin family. If so, he needs to prepare a larger amount of spiritual stones for circulation. Just do it. Letting Taoist Wei to manage my Qin family's flying sword industry in Sangxiafeng City, Guang'an Prefecture, will be an attempt on the road of my Qin family's future development. My Qin family is still young in the Fu character generation, and there are not enough Taoist cultivators. Only by boldly using outsiders can it be in line with the rapid development of my Qin family. Qin Daoxian analyzed slowly. As for the problems of fleeing with money and corruption that you are worried about, as long as an incentive compensation system and a strict financial management system are established, this situation can be avoided. Of course, we always know people who are not aware of people and misunderstand, but this loss is completely within the acceptable range for my Qin family. Even our Qin family can promise that in the future, for these active monks who have served my Qin family for a certain number of years, my Qin family can help him open up a new immortal family as a way of my Qin family's vassal family. Hearing this, Qin Daochuan's eyes lit up. If you talk about what the biggest wish of a loose cultivator is, the first one must be attaining the Tao and becoming an immortal. Whether it's a sect family cultivator or a loose cultivator, they all know in their hearts that no one in this world has ascended to the upper world for hundreds of thousands of years. The saying of becoming an immortal has almost become a phantom legend. At least for loose cultivators, it is an untouchable dream. And helping them create a cultivating family, becoming the ancestor of the family, watching their descendants spread, this can be said to be the most tempting thing for a loose cultivator who has no hope of immortality. But unfortunately, most of the loose cultivators do not have this opportunity and capital. To create a family of cultivating immortals, even the weakest chi-refining family, a wealthy partner and a lawful land, are indispensable. How can an ordinary loose cultivator have so much savings? Loose cultivators who can open up a family of cultivators without exception, are local tyrants in the cultivators. Now the big clan in Guang'an Prefecture like the Qin family is willing to help the loose cultivator to open up a cultivator family, and even willing to accept their family as a younger brother. This is a great good thing for the loose cultivator. It works. It works. Qin Daochuan's eyes lit up and he kept nodding. If it is conditional on helping the loose cultivator to open up the immortal family in the future, I believe that no loose cultivator can refuse this temptation, and will definitely do his best to serve my Qin family. Chapter 179. Finished talking about the magic weapon shop in Sangxiafeng City, Guang'an Prefecture. Qin Daoxian turned back to the topic again. He instructed, Daochuan, the currency that our Qin family is going to issue in Guanhai Xianqing has far-reaching significance, and we must not take a wrong step, otherwise for my Qin family it will be doomed. I heard Qin Daoxian take the matter so seriously. Qin Daochuan nodded solemnly and said, Young Patriarch, you can rest assured that I will take good care of the Chongping Central Bank you mentioned, and there will be no accidents. Despite Qin Daochuan's assurance, Qin Daoxian knew in his heart that Qin Daochuan knew nothing about the bank's operating mechanism, and he had to be on the sidelines at all times. In fact, Qin Daoxian was deeply touched when he used spirit stones back then, and it was really inconvenient to use spirit stones as currency. Fortunately, the loose cultivator still has a storage bag and the loose cultivator is shy in his pocket. Usually he does not have many spiritual stones in his body. But many family monks probably have this kind of painful experience. For example, the 80 million spirit stones allocated by the Guang'an Prefecture Allied Forces to the Western Defense Region Allied Forces used 10 Spirit Void battleships to transport them. 80 million spiritual stones, if piled on the ground, would be as high as a hill. There is no storage bag in the world that can hold so many spirit stones. In fact, from that time on, Qin Daoxian had the idea of replacing the spirit stone with a currency. It's just that the Qin family was weak at that time. The sphere of influence is limited to the land of Jianghu Island, and there are only 11 cultivators in the clan. If you want to talk about the use of spirit stone coins to replace spirit stones for trading and circulation, let alone outsiders laughing, the cultivator of the Qin family probably wanted to laugh when he heard it. Qin Daoxian knows that the issuance of a currency is definitely not a simple matter. First, the currency has to be collateralized. In the past, the issuance of currency was initially based on gold as collateral, that is, the gold standard system. This system is divided into 3 stages, or 3 forms: gold coin, gold bullion standard, and gold exchange standard. Even the US dollar, the world currency in the previous life, was the gold standard used for a long time. But later, with the continuous development of productive forces and materials, the gold standard monetary system has been unable to adapt to the rapid development of productive forces. The performance is that there are too many products being produced and too little gold to issue enough money. If a huge amount of excess currency is issued, in order to adapt to the development of productivity. But in this way, it will inevitably face the risk of gold acceptance. That is, a bunch of people holding money and wanting to accept gold will find that there is no gold to accept. This is undoubtedly an extremely dangerous thing, which will cause a devastating blow to the credit of the currency. The development of society to this stage also means that the gold standard monetary system gradually declines. In modern society, the issuance of currency is no longer collateralized by some kind of physical object, but has become a collateral of nothingness, that is, national credit. Of course, if the Qin family uses the family credit as collateral to issue a currency, it is estimated that they will be spat on by colleagues in Guang'an. Qin Daoxian still has this point. Since credit cannot be used as the collateral for currency issuance, the only choice is to use the spirit stone itself, which everyone agrees with as the acceptance. Even so, in order for the loose cultivators and family cultivators in Guanhai Xianqing to accept such a currency, Qin Daoxian had to make adequate preparations. Except for currency acceptances, another difficulty is the currency itself. In the past, most countries issue paper currency. According to the different anti-counterfeiting measures of each country, the quality of the currency produced is also different. Some currencies have excellent anti-counterfeiting measures and are difficult to counterfeit. And some currencies just call a printing and dyeing factory can do better. The currency issued by the Qin family must have the characteristics of being difficult to counterfeit and easy to issue. This is not a simple matter. In other words, these 2 requirements are somewhat contradictory. Difficult to counterfeit means that the currency is difficult to counterfeit and easy to issue, which means that the production speed is fast. To solve this contradiction, we must have superb coinage technology. And this problem, it was the first task that Qin Daoxian handed over to the Institute of Magical Instruments established by Qin Daochu. Twin Lakes Island. A ray of light crossed the sky and landed in the spiritual veins of Jianghu Island. In front of you, a unique building appeared in front of Zakhen Daochuan. On the plaque of the building, the characters Chongping Dharma Instrument Research Institute are written. Qin Daochuan and the others are basically immune to the endless new names of the young patriarch. Or not immune. But the education Qin Daochu and Qin Daochuan received since they were children is the Enlightenment education Qin Daoxian gave them. These new terms they have been exposed to since childhood. On the contrary, when I grew up and saw those completely different names in the outside world, I felt a little weird. At this point, this is especially true of the people of the Fu family who have received this kind of education since childhood. To some extent, their vision is closer to that of Qin Daoxuan's children in previous lives. That's it. Qin Daoxian smiled at Qin Daochuan. Let's go. Young patriarch, please. Qin Daochuan made a pleased gesture. Qin Daoxian nodded, raised his legs and walked towards the interior of the Magical Instrument Research Institute, followed by Qin Daochuan. The exterior construction style of Chongping Dharma Instrument Research Institute is quite ancient. It is very similar in structure to the traditional Xinjia Palace in Wanxinghai, but the interior is completely different. It was divided into small laboratories by Qin Daochu. That's right, it's the kind of laboratory that Qin Daoxian built in Qitong Mountain back then. Only, the laboratory of the Chongping Institute of Magical Instruments is almost empty. Come to think of it, at the age of Qin Jiafa's cultivator and his level of refining, he still does not have the ability to run a laboratory by himself. Even though their crafting talent was blessed by Qin Daoxuan's preaching. Nowadays, in addition to Qin Daoxian, Qin Daochu is the only one in the Qin family. With the blessing of Qin Daoxuan's preaching, he barely has the understanding and ability to create a new type of magic weapon. Good boy, well done. As soon as he walked into the laboratory, Qin Daoxian heard Qin Daochu's excited praise. What's the matter, why are you so happy? Young patriarch? Hearing this voice, Qin Daochu turned his head and saw Qin Daoxian and Qin Daochuan walking in one after the other. Daochuan, when did you come back? Seeing Qin Daochuan, Qin Daochu, who grew up with him since childhood, said excitedly. I was just transferred back to Guanhai Xianqing by the young patriarch today. Great. Hearing the two reminiscing about the past, Qin Daoxian interrupted with a smile. Okay, let's talk about the reminiscence later. How is the research on the task I gave you? It's been almost half a year. Successful. Hearing Qin Daoxian mentioning the task, Qin Daochu was all excited. Chapter 180? Young Patriarch, please take a look. Qin Daochu presented a treasure like a treasure, and took out a banknote that was very similar to his previous life. But look carefully. This paper currency is very different from the previous paper currency. The first is the difference in material. Qin Daoxian took the banknotes handed by Qin Daochu, and flicked it gently with his hand, making a rushing sound. This is paper? Qin Daoxian looked at each other in surprise. Yes, but not quite. Qin Daochu paused. To be precise, this is a special talisman paper we developed. Of course Qin Daoxian knew what a talisman was. The so-called talisman paper is to grind the rhizomes of Lingji into pulp, and finally dehydrate the pulp, and then go through a series of processes to make it into the appearance of paper. Compared with the paper made by mortals, the talisman paper also changed the raw material from trees to spiritual plants. In the rest of the process, there is little difference between the two. However, because of the change in raw materials, the talisman paper is extremely tough, far less fragile than ordinary paper. Qin Daoxian took the talisman paper handed over by Qin Daochu, and then pressed lightly with his hand, but it did not tear it apart. See here. Qin Daoxian couldn't help showing a smile and said, It's interesting. However, this alone is far from meeting my requirements. Of course I don't know that. Qin Daochu smiled mysteriously, and then he brought a very strange magic weapon and said, This is the key magic weapon to test this kind of paper money. This is. He looked at the square magic tool that Qin Daochu handed over. At the bottom of the magic tool there was a glazed platform. Qin Daochu stretched out his hand and said, Young Patriarch, please borrow the paper money, heard. Qin Daoxian handed over the banknotes in his hand. Qin Daochu put the banknotes on the stage made of lioli. Next second. A strange lotus-shaped pattern appeared on the banknote. This? Qin Daoxian looked at the scene in front of him and felt very miraculous. At this moment he did not feel any fluctuations in spiritual energy and infuriating energy, but there was a lotus flower-shaped pattern on the banknote, and it was shimmering with light. It's like the fluorescence emitted by the banknotes in the previous life under the money detector. Qin Daochu immediately took the banknotes away from the square instrument, and immediately returned to its original appearance. Seeing this, Qin Daoxian couldn't help but be very curious and said, How did you do it? Material and pattern. Qin Daochu stretched out 2 fingers, then pointed at a 7 or 8-year-old boy in the crowd and said, It's him who found this material. Oh. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian looked at a rather silent 7 or 8-year-old child in the crowd, recalled it carefully and said, Your name is Qin Fulai, right? Right. Qin Fulai nodded. Qin Daoxian also taught the first batch of monks who entered the school. With the cultivator's memory, it is not surprising to recognize Qin Fulai. How did you discover this material? Qin Daoxian asked. I discovered this new type of talisman paper by accident when I taught myself the inheritance of family talismans, but after I made this talisman paper, I couldn't make it into a magic talisman at all, so I didn't care. Later, I was selected by Mr. Daochu to enter the Chongping Institute of Magical Instruments. We studied this new type of banknotes proposed by you, the Patriarch, but we could not find suitable paper. So I came up with this new type of talisman paper that I stumbled upon. I wanted to try it out and it turned out to be a real success. Qin Daochu on the side sighed with emotion. Speaking of which, we are also lucky. Although this kind of talisman paper cannot be used to make magic talismans, it can inscribe a very special pattern. After the array pattern is melted into the talisman paper, and then tested by the money detector we developed, it will emit a lotus-shaped fluorescence just like what you just saw, young Patriarch. You mean? This talisman paper has a pattern on it? Isn't it a magic weapon? Qin Daoxian frowned. The banknotes he needed were easy to make, but had a high enough anti-counterfeiting threshold. Right now, this kind of anti-counterfeiting threshold is high enough, but it is not easy to make. Incorporating the array pattern means that this inconspicuous banknote is a magic weapon. Without a specific refining method, who can imitate it? Young patriarch, listen to me, although this paper currency is a special magic weapon, because the pattern is simple, as long as the cultivator in the qi refining stage is proficient in mastering it, it can be engraved in an instant. Right? Yes, very simple. Hear the chorus of the crowd. Qin Daoxian said non-committally, how simple is it? Heard. Qin Daochu hurriedly handed over a jade slip. Qin Daoxian took the jade slip and sank his consciousness into it. Next second. With a strange expression on his face, he pulled out his divine sense from the inside of the jade slip. This array pattern is indeed simple enough, or if Qin Daochu didn't say that it was an array pattern, he even doubted that there was such a simple array in the world. But no matter how simple the formation pattern is, once the formation is integrated into the tool, no matter how high the cultivator is, it is impossible to see what the formation pattern looks like. Otherwise, wouldn't the family cultivator be able to reversely introduce the refining method of high-level spirit armor by purchasing high-level spirit armor? This is obviously impossible. At the speed of 12 people in our research institute, we can make this semi-finished banknote into a finished product. About 1 cup of tea can make 100 pieces. 1 cup of tea makes 100 pieces. If it is refined for 5 hours a day, that is 6,000 banknotes, and the denomination of 1 banknote is 100 spirit stone coins, which is 600,000 spirit stone coins. 1 month is 18 million spirit stone coins. If you increase the number of people, this speed will be even faster. Based on the current circulation demand of Guanhai Xianqing, about 30 million spirit stone coins are needed, which is enough to maintain the normal operation of the entire Guanhai Xianqing. Of course, the denomination of spirit stone coins cannot be only 100. In fact, Qin Daoxian divided the denominations of Lingshi coins into 13 types in total according to his previous life experience. There are 13 points, 2 points, 5 points, 1 corner, 2 corners, 5 corners, 1 yuan, 2 yuan, 5 yuan, 10 yuan, 20 yuan, 50 yuan, and 100 yuan. Some people may wonder. 1 cent, that is, 1% of the spirit stone coins, can you still buy things? Actually, the purchasing power of Lingshi is very strong. The reason why I felt that Lingshi couldn't help but spend it was because the things that Qin Daoxian usually bought were very precious treasures for monks. If you use spirit stones to buy bulk materials used by ordinary people, 1 spirit stone can buy a lot of things. Then, he only spent 1 spirit stone when he bought a young and beautiful slave girl from Izumo. If you use spiritual stones to buy food for ordinary people, you don't know how much you need to buy a single spiritual stone. Therefore, there is no problem in calculating the denomination of spirit stones with the minimum unit of points. Because even if it is a loose cultivator, there will be many servants behind them to serve them, and these ordinary people need to consume resources to eat and drink. These resources, if they are large transactions, are purchased with spirit stones. It is possible that small transactions between mortals will also be settled in currencies such as gold, silver, and copper, but large transactions between monks will not agree with these 3 metal currencies. In order to feed their tens of millions of people, the Zhou family has always relied on the food grown by slaves driven by the loose cultivators of Guang'an Prefecture. To buy these grains, the currency for settlement is Lingshi. It is impossible for the loose cultivators to grow food for the Zhou family for no reason. Metals like gold, silver, and bronze are of no use to monks. Therefore, if a large number of these 13 currencies are refined, the time required may be doubled. It's just that Qin Daoxian can't wait, he has to send more people. At the end of this month, he will start implementing his currency replacement plan. Anyone who knows economics knows it. The development of currency is also divided into stages. From a geographical point of view, currency can be divided into pilot, regional, and finally full popularization. From the perspective of the internationalization process, it can be divided into 4 stages. The first stage is the implementation of free convertibility of the balance of payments under the current account. In Qin Daoxuan's previous life, the renminbi had just completed this stage. To put it simply, the spirit stone coins will be freely exchangeable in trade among the major forces in Guang'an Prefecture in the future. And this is the first step in the monetary process. If one day the spirit stone coins issued by Qin Daoxian will completely replace the spirit stones and become the only currency in circulation in this world, that also means that he unified everything in the world of immortals. Whether it is economic, military, or cultural, It is possible to achieve this effect only after all have been unified. Now, what Qin Daoxian wants to do is to put money on a pilot basis in the simplest way for any sovereign government. That is, inside Guanhai Xianqing use spirit stone coins. Want to do this? Acceptance, currency security, force security, the major clan forces in the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, and the cooperation of the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone are all indispensable. Now it seems. Qin Daoxian has solved two problems. Acceptance and currency guarantee. Next. He also wants to let the major families in Guang'an Prefecture cooperate with him to implement this plan. But before that, he had to completely subdue the coalition army in the Western Defense Zone and turn this coalition army into his private army to some extent. Actually, Qin Daoxian had planned to carry out this plan as early as the beginning of the establishment of the Western Defense Zone coalition army. Because as long as you are interested, you will find out. There are very few family cultivators among the senior members of the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone. Qin Daoxian's direct subordinates had a total of 10,000 chiefs, among whom there were only 2 family cultivators, Zhou Muqing of the Zhou family and Wei Lidao of the Wei family. The rest of the people are all foundation-building cultivators from loose cultivators. The reason why so many scattered cultivators were chosen to be the military commanders of the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone. It is Qin Daoxian who wants to completely subdue this army and turn it into a private army of his Qin family. Although Qin Daoxian is now the commander of the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone, he relies on his own strength and potential. It's not how powerful the Qin family really is. Others do not say. There are very few available people in the Qin family. Except for the 10 monks of the Taoist generation, the monks of the Blessing generation have not grown up, and it is impossible to let them go out on their own. As Qin Daoxian said, for the rapid development of the Qin family, it is inevitable to use outsiders on a large scale. But it is also important to enable outsiders. That is, to enable loose cultivators, and never enable family cultivators, because for a family cultivator, the most important thing is always his own family. In this regard, Qinyuan Jianzong and his Qin family are surprisingly similar to some extent. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.